Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call our regular council meeting of October the 23rd to order, please. We're just a few minutes late, but thank you for being patient here. So a few changes to this evening's agenda. I would like, as we approve it, that we move item 11.1, the RCMP quarterly update, and 11.2, Department of Community Safety submission, cannabis regulation in BC, to immediately follow adoption of the minutes, please. So moved by Councillor Berger and seconded by Councillor Loggins. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion's carried. Actually, I wouldn't mind making a change that 11.2, if the staff sergeant is able to stay, I wouldn't mind receiving any public input on that. To receive here if we're going to make a submission, or what council can consider is that there is an online survey available for residents to give input. So I'll ask you which way you prefer that to be. Are you comfortable with it being ahead and then we won't receive public input on it? Okay, just mindful of time. Okay, all right, we'll leave it as I've read it then. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, we do have some minutes here. Minutes of the Development and Engagement Workshop from September the 6th. So there is a motion that we could receive this, and we also have in it some recommendations that came from that workshop that could flow to the next one unless council has any questions or would like to offer any different direction at this time. Move receipt by Councillor Berger, seconded by Councillor Loggins. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, so at this point I would like to welcome our Staff Sergeant forward. Thank you, Staff Sergeant. We appreciate you being here with us this evening.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just an update on RCMP activities over the summer months. Constable Reed Miller, who was in Sooke for in excess of 4 years, was transferred to Sydney Detachment, and that put us at, as you know, our complement with the new sergeant's position, which came on in September, is now 17. We operated through the summer months with an average of 11 members, plus 2 recruits, 2 new members who are in training and remain in training at the time of this report. This should rectify itself fairly quickly. Maybe I'll just give you an update on the new position we created, which is going to be a sergeant. And for anyone who doesn't know, sergeant is a rank in between myself and the 2 supervisors that we have, who are corporals. He'll be operations support. This went out as a new position. Our policy is to put it out to lateral applications. We didn't receive any qualified applicants laterally, so the next move was it went promotionally, and that closes on Wednesday, the 25th. I anticipate it will be 6 to 8 weeks after that, and then the time when we get a actual sergeant on the ground here will depend if it's someone out of town or someone from the Greater Victoria area who wins the position. With respect to our present numbers, Constable Sean Heidemann returns from paternity leave in December. We have Constable David Devine transferring in from Lissom's Nass Valley, formerly called New Ianch, which is up north of New Hazelton, that area, not too far from Terrace. He doesn't have a house to sell, so we expect he'll be here end of November, early December, which will just leave us with 1 vacancy, which is presently held for a member trying to sell his house in Port St. John. But it'll put us near where we're supposed to be. So I've been in touch with Mr. Blackhall. We're operating at a bit of a deficit due to the amount of overtime we're using. As is usually the case, I'm hoping that will be offset with salary dollars, which will be significantly lighter this year due to vacancies we're running. On an operational point, our file count for this time This year it's 158, 160 files less than last year, which I don't deem to be significant in any way. So generally we're pretty much at the same file load as last year. We remain committed to our detachment initiatives, and one of those was an improvement in our enforcement of traffic offenses and impaired driving. We're working closely with the schools right now with some of their issues. We have a significant spike in the amount of immediate roadside prohibitions that our members have issued, as well as criminal impaired charges. We have increased our presence somewhat, but it's been difficult with the staff shortages with respect to organizing some community events of our own, which was a detachment initiative. We'll probably catch up before the end of our fiscal year and complete that. However, on the community policing side of things, we are about to go from 0 and bring on our 8th neighborhood watch, which is great work by Constable Sam Haldane and members of the community. As well, our officers continue to check on prolific offenders who we've been able to charge and who are either on bail or probation, who have curfews and other conditions. We continue to monitor them and to breach them and try and get them back into jail or some kind of treatment where we can. And our prolific offender program continues kind of status quo. It's probably in need of a little bit of attention from summer months when we haven't paid an awful lot of attention to it. That's about the end of my report. I see you have a full agenda, so I'll leave it there and take any questions, Your Worship.
Thank you. I believe through a conversation we might have had that one of the staff that you have is quite skilled in traffic assessments, and that's helped when there's been motor vehicle incidents in terms of opening the road faster than it has been previously from that skill set?
Investigation of serious traffic accidents?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's something I think just important for our community when it comes to any closure, particularly on Highway 14, that we do have this in-house skill level now that's helping with to get traffic moving that we didn't really have before.
Yeah, I'd say it's helping somewhat in the initial assessment. Of course, once you get experts on the scene and something serious, it's still a long closure and probably goes up with their level of expertise, it seems, because they can do more processes to try and get to the bottom of things. But for now, with Corporal Gillen here, that does help us out a bit.
Okay. Other questions from members of council? Councillor Pearson, then Parkinson.
Yes, thank you, Staff Sergeant, for your report. Just a general question, and maybe you don't have any information. Sorry, excuse me. Cannabis legalization coming at us in a rapid fashion. July 1st next year, Canada Day, I guess, is when it's scheduled to be legal. Mm-hmm. Is there preliminary reports and work being done with the RCMP across the country, or are you part of that?
Well, there is some work being done on it, and we're going to speak to that with the Chief Mount here, and I'm going to stay on for the discussion on this, I guess. But I don't expect really much impact from that whatsoever. And my analogy is that like we're moving to legal sale, but we're not introducing a drug. The drug is already here. It was here before the dispensaries are here. It's just changed a little bit the way it's marketed. So just like a liquor store, the liquor store sell their product, and we're almost never down there. They do a good job of monitoring who they're selling to and all the rest. And that's going to be the same for however it's set up, I hope. So then what it comes down to is the physiological effects of marijuana. Is that going to make us busy? Well, no busier than we are already. Mm-hmm. And as it happens, the physiological effects of alcohol are what drives most of our business. But I don't anticipate really much impact from it whatsoever.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that answer. Yeah, I was specifically talking about the increased cost to the municipality, or if you saw there was any. Lots of questions came out of the UBCM around it about the enforcement piece of it and the impaired detection. I guess when people are driving vehicles, is that sort of something that's coming live towards you? near future?
Councillor Pearson, sorry to jump in, but maybe we can just leave that for when we get into that particular report and the chief has an opportunity to introduce it. If
Sure, yeah, it's a good question. But,
okay.
If you're all right with that, it's good.
Okay,
yeah, thanks.
thank you. Councillor Parkinson?
Through you, Your Worship, to the Staff Sergeant, I was just wondering how large the caseload was today.
I can't think of the actual number. We're just below 5,000, I believe, but I can get back to you with the exact number.
Oh, that's good.
Yep.
Thank you.
Other comments from members of council? So just generally, as you look ahead, what would you say are the two biggest issues facing the Sooke detachment?
The two biggest issues facing the detachment, well, I don't think they're littering and smoking marijuana. It probably they would be alcohol abuse and domestic violence. It's another excellent question, actually, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. That seems to be has been the trend for quite some while, unfortunately. So.
That's right.
Okay.
And one of our initiatives is to try and get the word out on domestic violence and try and link more offenders and victims up with help that's available and get them reporting. And we have formed a domestic violence working group on that.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the work that you do. Anything further from council? Okay, a motion to receive, please. Moved by Councillor Berger and seconded by Councillor Parkinson. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, so next we'll move on to the second report, which is 11.2, Department of Community Safety Submission, Cannabis Regulation in BC. At our last meeting, we received the letter from the minister, and that's what sort of triggered the staff report that we have in front of us. So I'll hand it over to our chief, who's also our acting CEO this evening.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report here was really done in consultation with elected officials with feedback from UBCM, as well as the staff sergeant, firefighting staff, and district staff. So I'll just kind of highlight a few of the key points here, and then I'll pass it back over to the staff sergeant so we can talk about the sections there that were related to the personal consumption and some of the criminal code. From the fire department perspective, some of the things that initially jumped out on us from discussions was the need to understand where facilities are for a safety reason for pre-incident planning, making awareness to fire department staff of where these locations could be in the current situation. We expect that there's probably some illegal operations, but we'll have a better understanding where legal ones are in a situation where it becomes legal, so it's not a immediate impact as far as a negative thing that's seen at the fire department.
If I could just get clarity, is that a facility to grow, are you referring to, or a community or a facility that sells?
This would be a growing operation.
Okay.
The other parts of this report touch into the need to conduct an inspection. So if there was a licensing process in place, that would trigger a form of building or fire inspection. And this would help us identify any kind of code compliances with respect to things like electrical changes or building modifications and ventilation to structures. One thing we brought up concern from the fire department staff as well was what does it mean on the personal cultivation side, and how are multi-residential structures dealing with a certain amount of product in there, and are they being vented properly, and are electrical systems being pushed to a certain degree. The other part of this report looked at the criminal code side of it, and I know the staff sergeant looked at a few things, and I'll pass it on to you, and then I'll summarize a few things.
On the criminal code?
Yeah, there's a few sections here that you almost talked about.
Oh, okay. And I just touched on this with Councillor Pearson. Marijuana is already readily available in Sooke area, and this predates the arrival of the dispensaries. The criminal code provides for charges against those impaired by drugs, but police officers are not as prepared for these investigations presently for straight marijuana impairment as they would be for alcohol. The RCP envisions that this will improve with time and with new testing protocols and technology adaptations. And presently, we have a group called Drug Recognition Experts, and the criminal code does give them the authority to demand tests from people suspected of driving under the influence of drugs. Anticipating that, whatever form the province decides for a distribution model, this will not cause the Sooke RCMP any commitment of resources, just as distribution of alcohol doesn't. And last point on this was just about the physiological effects, and this is kind of my own estimate as to how much Sooke will be taxed with marijuana legalization. Is that it's not going to impact us significantly. We might be more involved in some impaired driving, more training to combat that. It's already present. It's just kind of legalization is probably just bringing it into the limelight a little bit. But I don't anticipate, any significant change for us. Thanks, Chief.
I want to summarize a couple other things here that came from comments through the elected officials. Some of the comments that came through attendance at the UBCM conference are noted below here. There's not a legal framework from the federal government and not a set standardization of legalization for all the provinces and local governments. That land use and zoning will be the only tools for a local government to regulate sales. The growing of product for recreational use and potential safety concerns in multifamily dwellings needs to be clear. The province should look at the cold beer and wine distribution regulation, and there was questions about sign regulations and bylaws. I think the general theme I got from feedback from elected officials was that there's kind of a perception of provincial downloading, and that's definitely something that is countered upon, that it should be provincially uploaded. The regulation should be coming from the province, and the local government shouldn't really be taking on any more bylaw strains and need for extra resources. One of the last comments here was that I got from some other members of staff was concerns about the handling of food and candy, and if there is a dispensary side of it from the private side, that what is the competencies for personnel and people are operating a private business to have a skill set that make sure they're handling food products properly. And there was, a concern about candy products getting into the hands of the wrong people as well. So to summarize, I think it's important that the impact on local government resources looks at maintaining regulation at the province is the general kind of summary that I got out of compiling this report. And this is a report that will be parts of it sent off to the ministry as the submission that was requested in that letter.
Questions or comments from members of council? Okay, so for myself, since I sit on the UBCM as second vice, I've been appointed to the Joint Committee on Cannabis Regulation. This was announced at the UBCM, and it's comprised of both elected officials from across the province as well as both senior staff from both the government and from local government. And the idea, what's promising, is that the province wants as much local government input as is available. They understand that it does fall within our communities. There is a survey that I mentioned that's hosted on the provincial worksite or on their website, and they're looking for feedback by November the 1st, so everyone is encouraged to fill it out. As you've heard, it's the provinces each have to figure out how they're going to regulate this, and in the absence of, then the federal law prevails. So one thing that you'll see in the report that was attached is, for example, smoking. You cannot smoke within so many distances of doorways, windows, air vents, certain parks and the like. You may be allowed to smoke cannabis in those areas. So then that would come down to maybe a nuisance complaint, and our staff would start to receive complaints from somebody perhaps not liking the odors, or smoking inside, or smoking here and there also. So they're looking at how the model will occur. Is it going to be through provincial places like provincial liquor stores? Or will it be a mix like we see here, where we have cold beer and wine stores? People can cultivate, brew beer or whiskey or the like, at wine at home. So will there be U-brew sites or U-grow sites available? Also discussion on whether or not can you smoke cannabis in a public place. Would that be a specific lounge where you can go like we see in other parts of the world, or not? So those are all things that the province has to work through. Edibles will not be dealt with until 2019 because it's a Health Canada issue in terms of how any sort of item you buy at the grocery store is federally regulated, and there's a process to get those items on the shelf. So that's where the edible line is going through that. So it is coming into effect July 1st, and that's why they're looking for as much feedback as possible. So everyone's encouraged to go online. The feds have set a minimum age as 18. The provinces can change that. Some are recommending it stays consistent with alcohol limits like we see. There's possession limits that have been set federally. The provinces can look to change those. And every province handles alcohol slightly different. So that's where we'll see how that all unrolls. But we'll see how it goes. Everyone's looking at it very openly and gathering as much information as possible. So we'll leave it at that, unless there's anything else from council. In terms of the feedback that you wish to provide back to the minister, is it the case of just summarizing the concerns that you raised, that we heard from the fire chief, in terms of, okay, let's say you live in a strata, for example, and personal consumption allows you to have 4 plants and to grow 4 anywhere on or in your property. So that is the case of how it impacts building and code and design and zoning and the like. So we do have a motion to consider, unless there's anything else that you would like to see added. Councillor Berger.
Yes, thank you. So after attending my sort of one-day workshop that I went to at UBCM with Councillor Pearson, the fellow that was there brought up such a wide range of topics and things that municipalities should look at. And when I brought it up at our last council meeting, what concerned me is the implications that it can have on each province, as well as what the municipalities will have to pick up as far as the slack. They went so far as to saying that possible provincial building codes will have to be changed, because if recreational use is allowed, then does that mean there has to be more ventilation for multifamily homes, for apartments? And so to me, it just got to be such a huge issue that there was no set standard being brought forward. And I felt like it was really just sort of going to be dumped on the municipality's lap as to how we were going to look at zoning. And I sort of left that session a little bit afraid. I was hoping that the province would sort of take the bull by the horns and institute some sort of regulation that's similar to alcohol. So I would like to see us put forward something, sorry, I'm trying to read and talk at the same time, something that would put more responsibility back on the province and to regulate medical and recreational cannabis in the same way that alcohol is. I mean, one of the things that the speaker brought up, he said, currently the Cannabis Act allows a person to have up to 30 grams. However, it's silent on its use. So right now, the fellow that was speaking, and I'll ask the chief if this is correct, he said because it's silent on its use, it's gray area. Yeah. So if you can have this much cannabis on your person right now medically, very soon it's going to be recreationally as well. Where does that leave? I just was really disappointed that if the federal government is going to bring out this cannabis is now going to be allowed, which that's totally fine, they should be pointing municipalities in the right direction on how to deal with it. I think doing these one-offs per municipality is going to cause nothing but problems. So my belief is to have the provincial government set some guidelines, but
that's what they're doing. Okay. Yeah, so they have to have something in place prior to July 1st, or what's come down for the federal government would end up prevailing if the province did nothing. So that's why right now they're looking to obtain as much input as they can so that they can put everything, cabinet can bring it forward and enact it. So that's, it is exactly that. Like it says here, it's the consumption part, different types of consumption. If BC does not legislate restrictions on public consumption by the time Bill C-64 comes into force, it will be legal to smoke, vapes, and otherwise consume cannabis in public, including in places where tobacco smoking and vaping are forbidden. So that's why the province is now moving very quickly. They formed the joint committee, and UBCM, hearing about this, already did a survey of its membership back in April and has a policy document in place, and then it's just waiting for the new government to form and get going on it. So they have created their own secretariat to deal with this and are moving quite quickly. And that's where our premier pushed back against the feds, saying, no, you need to do greater consultation with local government, and that's exactly what's happening with the government. Councillor Pearson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Tate. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head for me is that municipal governments have to have input, there's no doubt. But the federal government is a federally regulated substance, and I think that some of that pushback has to go back to the federal government. Things that Councillor Berger has alluded to, like tax rates. Tax rates have to be constant across all jurisdictions, and I think that our message, or the message I would like to say, is that the federal government is imposing this on us. They should be taking the heat on the regulations and making that clarity at the front end, as opposed to us kind of trying to guess province by province across things. Like I say, tax rates could increase smuggling between places because it's an easy substance to smuggle, as we all know. So those are things that I think need to be done before we accept it. So,
but that's where, like, to be clear, the federal government's decision to legalize creates the need for provinces and territories to regulate it. It's up to the province to regulate this, not the federal government. What they are going to be doing is the feds are going to ensure that the supply is safe. So this is where anyone that's growing it, the whole intent from the Prime Minister was that it not go into the hands of minors or into organized crime. So they're ensuring that I guess like eggs, they're federally controlled so that it's a safe supply. So that's where you don't question the supply. It's not tainted, it's not mixed, it's not in the hands of organized crime. There's a whole licensing aspect that would need to be put into effect. And then provinces regulate then, okay, now that it's here, then how does it get distributed to people? Do they mail away for it? Do they buy it from a place? Can they buy it and consume it in a place? Can you only consume it at home and the like? Colorado's already gone through this. They can purchase it, but you cannot use it publicly. So that's something that they have in place there, and it's changing. So I suspect it's going to be rapidly evolving as time goes on. But that's why everyone here in this room can go online, fill out the survey, and give some input. And it seems they're approaching it with a very open mind to do the best, recognizing that BC is very mixed, but also to come up with the best fit. And that's where, if it does impact local government, as the chief said, it comes down to zoning and where we would zone and allow for this type of use. That's something to consider. And the inspection and likely the nuisance complaints if the smells are bothering one neighbor or another. So that's what we would need to consider. Anything else from anyone? Okay, so at this point, we have a motion first off to receive the report for information. Moved by Councillor Berger and seconded by Councillor Loggins. Any comments on receiving? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. And that Council consider issues for inclusion in the comprehensive Mayor and Council submission to the Cannabis Legalization and Regulation Secretariat through the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General. For myself, it's just highlighting on the comments that the Chief made, and also that we push back that the costs and the responsibility lies with the province. Something to that end. Everyone comfortable with that? Okay, someone feel free to move that. Moved by Councillor Loggins and seconded by Councillor Berger. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you very much, Staff Sergeant. We'll talk about this again next summer and see where we're at. Okay, so we'd like to move on, and we have 2 delegations this evening. So I'd like to welcome up the first one, which is the Knox Vision Society, please. And just a note to the presenter, welcome, that you have 5 minutes, and there is a timer there. If you could please just be mindful of the time. Thank you.
Turn this on. There we go. Thank you, Your Worship, members of Council, members of district staff. My name is Andy Orr. I'm with Atcor Development Consulting, and we are working with the Knox Vision Society pursuant to their affordable housing project on their property up at Church Road and Wadhams Way. We're here this evening to provide Council with a brief update of where we're at in the process, and also to follow up on a letter that was submitted to Mayor and Council on October the 2nd, requesting the district's consideration to become an equity partner in the affordable housing project. Namely, the Society would like Council's consideration for waiving of development cost charges associated with the project, as well as consideration for waiving of fees, permit fees, and thirdly, provision of a 10-year tax exemption on property taxes. Just a bit of background. The Society received a provisional project approval from the province through BC Housing in March 2017. And within that, our proposed budget is $11.3 million. And the province is providing a capital grant in the amount of $5.35 million. We have a 42-unit project that went before Council last October 10th for development permit and was approved. And so now we've proceeded into design development drawings and full working drawings. If some of you have been up near the site, you'll notice that there's been some topsoil stockpiled, clearing and grubbing has commenced. The building itself consists of 42 units, and it's a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. And it has a total square footage of 43,520 square feet. Within that, there is some non-residential space, a small cafe consisting of about 750 square feet, and another commercial retail unit that hasn't been earmarked for anyone in particular yet, of about 620 square feet. All in all, the non-residential space is just over 3% of the total square footage of the building. Revenue generated from these social enterprise services will go back into the operating budget for the housing project and will help to assist the Society in keeping those rents affordable. The rents proposed for the project are geared towards low to moderate income households, and currently our pro forma is in a good position, and we, of course, tonight, after Council's consideration for any contributions, we'll be able to update that pro forma, get it into BC Housing, and try to move forward towards a final project approval. Our schedule is such that we would like to start construction at the beginning of the new year. Under District of Sooke Bylaw 408, eligible housing, which this project we believe is permissively exempt from development cost charges. And when we do the translation, and it's subject to staff calculations, when we translate that in, it works to about $27 per unit per month averaged over the 42 units if DCCs are waived. The Society's also requested a 10-year tax exemption, which is really important in the early years of their up and running, so that they have mortgage payments. It'll be approximately $6 million mortgage that they have to pay back. If they are able to get a property tax exemption, it allows them to also reduce the rents on average on a per unit basis of about $150 a month. So the combination of DCCs and property tax forgiveness really gives the Society a leg up on setting rents that are very, very affordable compared to what market rent would be for a similar project. The participation of the district as an equity partner in this project would be most welcome by Knox Vision Society, and of course the constituents of the community who will occupy the building eventually. On behalf of the Society and our development team, thank you for your consideration, and I'd be happy to answer any questions Council may have.
Thank you very much for the written and for your presentation this evening. Questions from members of Council? Councillor Pearson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Orr. Through the chair to Mr. Orr, thank you for your presentation tonight. I think it's very important that you understand that this council, or myself personally, and all the council I know, really is supportive in affordable housing. It's a key component of not only our community but the province wide, and it's something that's we're going to struggle with for a long time until we get our hands on it. You talked about rents low to moderate household income. Mm-hmm. Do you have kind of some qualifier around that?
Basically, it's a rent that's what they call household income limits for low to moderate income households. It's different for every community in the province, and Sooke falls under the Victoria calculation, and it's published every year in collaboration with CMHC and BC Housing, who administer it. And basically the premise is that it sets an income limit for a 1-bed, a 2-bed, a 3-bed unit, and that is the target or a benchmark that the society should try to hit. If they can go lower than that, then all the better. They create more affordability. In the case of Sooke being part of the Victoria, for example, a one-bed unit, the household income limit, which is calculated at 30% of your income, a one-bed unit should go for no more than $950 for the 2017 calendar year. It changes every year. So the society, what they would like to do is be at least 85% below that. But of course, to do that, they've got their own equity in terms of the land in the project. If we have District of Sooke equity into the project, it reduces the operating costs for the society, and it allows them to reduce their revenue stream, i.e. the rents, but still maintain the debt coverage ratio that they're required to meet to get financing to build the project.
Follow up, Councillor Pearson.
Yep. Thank you for that. And 950 seems high for the low income people, because I'm going, that's at 2850, because that's 2850 gross income per month. Correct. So 12 times 2850 is 28,000. So it seems. I mean, we heard a means test recently at a council presentation that some people are going to be excluded yet who are on that lower end at a $33,000 or $34,000 a year per income. So I think anything we can do to get that down even lower than the 950 would be prudent. So right, okay. But thank you for your presentation, and thank you for the good work that's going into this project. So.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, so what council can do is request a staff report just outlining how we can proceed with this. Councillor Parkinson, then Berger, I believe.
Through your worship to staff, my questions would be along for the exemption for property taxes, the 10-year, because council has determined that it wasn't going to be for that length of time. So I think there's a number of questions that have to be answered first before we can proceed with this. So I would like to move that council receive the information and that staff provide a report at an upcoming meeting.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Loggins. Anything further to add on the motion, Councillor Parkinson?
No, thank you.
Speaking to the motion then, Councillor Berger, then Loggins, thank you.
Yes, hi. Just some, thank you for your presentation. Sorry, I've got a sinus infection, so my head's pounding a little bit right now, so bear with me. For myself, through you to staff, within the staff report that we'll be getting back, I would like to know what the financial implications would be of waiving the DCCs. If I remember correctly, if a municipality waives DCCs, they do have to make it up somehow. It's not just a flat fee that we can waive. It falls within the responsibility of our taxpayers to make up that difference. So for me, financially, I'd like to know what that number is, because that would be something that we'd be putting onto our taxpayers. The tax exemption we do look at, and I think we approved for 5 years, so that could be rolled over for another 5. And then waiving of permit fees, I'd like to know financially what that total number would be. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Loggins, we're good? Okay, anything further on the motion? So we'll have a staff report come back to us at the next meeting, which can sort of outline everything. Thank you for putting that forward, and then we can deliberate at that time. I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? This motion's carried. Thank you very much.
Worship.
Okay, our second delegation this evening is Mr. Herb Haldane from the Builders Association of Sooke. Welcome, Mr. Haldane. And you have 5 minutes, and please turn on the microphone.
Thank you very much. I came here today to lobby, basically, because we got these limiting distance situations with the building code, and I have to take continuing education to keep my builder's license, and it came up at one of the last courses that I took, and the professor talked to the group, and he said, you guys need to lobby your municipal governments, because the building code does show restrictions. They have expectations, but it's up to each individual municipality on how they want to administer the code and so on. I had a really good meeting with the fire chief, and we talked on Thursday in length and covered lots of bases on expectations and fire safety and so on. I mean, statistically, and the course provided some of the statistics, I mean, fire calls are less than 4% of all the calls, and the fire department does an amazing amount of calls, especially in a year and stuff, but if it's nationwide, you know, and they're talking about fire departments everywhere. It's less than 4% that are fire related, not even residential fires, just fire related. And even of those fires, life and death situations, I think there works out to average per province, about 6 people per year per province die in a fire-related incident. And that doesn't even necessarily have anything to do with, it could be a car fire, it could be other things. The whole point, I guess, being that at this point in time, some of the articles that I read talk that fire departments are first responder departments more than they're fire departments now. We're trying to change the building code to deal with fire, but because of past building code changes, we're talking about electrical building code changes, you're talking about non-flammable materials, sidings, drywalls, roofing materials, things like that. The house fires now have dropped some 50 or 60% since the 1980s. So we're getting to a point now where there's just less and less house fires, but we're putting more and more on top of the building code to try and protect something that's really not the big issue or the big problem. In Sooke, we have to be 2.4 meters away from a property line in order to have any windows down the side of a house at all. And we have small lots in the middle of the town, and these small lots are 11 and 12 meters wide. These are 350 square meter lots, and we're trying to create affordable housing. But who wants to buy a house that doesn't have windows down either side of the building? And you get to a point here where, you try to provide to people what they're looking for. You're basically providing them with a middle of a townhouse unit on its own single-family lot because you can't get windows down either side of the house. Our lots are 10 and 12 meters wide. Our minimum width of a house is 5 meters wide, so we have to be 16 foot something minimum to have a house. And we did that years ago, I guess, because nobody wanted to put mobile homes on property, so they created a restriction. Mobile homes tend to be 16 feet wide, so we created a bylaw so that mobile homes had to be, or homes have to be 16 foot 6 or 16 foot 5 in order to qualify. Well, we're getting to a point now where we're going to be building these tiny homes in Sooke at some point, I would guess, because we're trying to come up with more affordable housing, even more so than we are already. And at this point, if we start doing that, then we have to create smaller setbacks between the houses. And if there isn't really a fire issue and there isn't really fire problems because there's no documented cases of all these crazy fires happening. Even in Fort Mac there last year, 0 people died and they had an amazing amount of fires. So we don't want fires, but if we're talking about safety issues and stuff, in this case, it doesn't happen all the time statistically, and people don't die statistically. So if we can come up with some sort of, I guess, a setback relief, then we can create some of this smaller, affordable housing. And I think you're going to have people start to come forward more often. I'm sort of helping with a group that's just trying to get off the ground right now. We're talking about these little tiny homes, and there's so much homelessness going on now, and there's so many people who can't afford, who are even working class, to get into a home. I think we have to come up with something. We have to start thinking outside the box. And the building code is very restrictive, but municipalities have the power to come up with a building code that suits your area, your neighborhood, your situations. And the only place we have small lots in Sooke right now is in the sewer specified area. And the chief pointed out we don't have 24-hour service. And the rules require you be able to get to the fire within 10 minutes with a fire vehicle. It doesn't say it has to be a fire truck, it just says a fire department vehicle. But without 24-hour service, we can't meet the criteria. And I don't want this to be the vehicle to spend a whole pile more money and come up with 24-hour service, especially if fires aren't the issue. But I don't know how else to reach the goal other than either we go through you guys and come up with a relaxation, or the fire department comes up with a relaxation. But at this point, I don't have the answers to it, and I'm just hoping that the dialogue is started so we can go from there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Haldane. So what we're looking at then is for council to discuss the limiting distance separations and the fire response time within the sewer specified area.
Correct.
Okay, so Councillor Parkinson and Loggins?
So then I would move that council receive the information and that staff prepare a report for an upcoming meeting on this. I do have one question.
Can I have a seconder for it? Seconded by Councillor Loggins. Go ahead, Councillor Parkinson.
I do have one question. Would this affect people's house insurance?
No.
For their policies on what they get?
No. At this point, just to give you an example, on a house insurance policy on a home, they ask 2 questions. They ask, are you within 180 meters of a fire hydrant? Check the box off. Are you within, I think it's 8 kilometers of a fire department? They don't even ask how many people are involved with your fire department, and they just want to know those 2 boxes. Because fires have been less of an issue now than they were in the past, and they've dropped, like I say, 50 or 60% since the 80s. The fire, even the insurance companies now, fire's not their big issue. Flooding seems to be the big push, and I checked into that just to find out where they were at with that. So.
Okay. Well, we can also have staff give some more answers to that when we receive the report, unless you have a brief comment you'd like to make now, Chief. It's up to you.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I can comment on a few things. There is something in the insurance business called the dwelling protection grade, and I've been getting lots of questions on this recently just because we've recently passed a test called Superior Tanker Shuttle Service Accreditation, and we are in the process of bringing in a couple more firefighters. What we did recently with the Superior Tanker Shuttle Service Accreditation just means that we can move water. It doesn't really have anything to do with response times. There is quite a bit that can be done with the 10-minute response time, and there is a staffing model that different jurisdictions around BC have taken upon with respect to trying to achieve this. Some have done it prematurely and some are not successful at it. At the residential levels, if you do increase your staffing, you can move what's from a 3A rating, which has to do with hydrants in your area, to a 2 rating. So there is a minor kind of discount. It may be significant in other areas, all depending on current staffing levels. We're always trying to achieve a better type of response model in the fire department, and I did run some recent statistics to kind of showcase where we're at right now. In 2016 and 2017, our engine 1, with a minimum of a crew of 4, we are able to make 50% of the calls in a 1.5 to 2 kilometer driving distance from Station 1. And during the day, when if I happen to be around and another officer and a crew of 4 can roll quickly, we can move that to about 5 kilometers. We do quite a bit of first responder calls, and it's probably about 60% of our business, our core business. Fires is about 40%. That includes everything from vehicle fires to, hydro lines down to, small structure fires, kitchen fires. But when we run to medical calls during the day, when we actually have 2 people on shift, we're able to get to 95% of the calls within 10 minutes, and that coverage is about 9 kilometers from Station 1. So those are kind of interesting statistics that I ran quickly. I think some of the key points in order to achieve some of the actual drive, 10-minute response time is the ideal model is to have 4 members at a station at all time. Sending 2 limits our actual level of service, and if we get into that kind of position, we're at what we call exterior operations, and the bulletin from 2013 kind of talks about the vehicle that can go. And the item in here says the firefighting vehicle is one that's an integral firefighting equipment. It does not include support vehicles such as a pickup truck or other passenger vehicles. So it needs to be a rated vehicle that's capable of pumping water and connecting to hydrants, etc. Sending 2 would delay rescue operations and would ultimately delay, having our ability to do interior operations and be offensive on an incident. I think no matter what, there would be a cost component to it, including renovation, sleeping quarters, whether there's some incentive to volunteers to support staffing. There's some models out there that we're watching quite closely. I know there's benefits to the densification if we are able to achieve something like this, because we'll be able to support the developers on, being able to put more property, buildings on a lot of property. And I'm not sure if the DCCs are enough to kind of capture the costs that could be incurred on doing something like this, but we as a fire department will be supportive on looking into this further with a more comprehensive report. Okay, that's great, Chief. I think that it would be timely to receive that. Any further questions on or comments on the motion? We'll be receiving a fulsome staff report in time. Okay. All those in favor of report? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr.
Great,
Haldane.
thank you very much.
Okay, so that moves us into item 8, public question and comment period. There's 2 minutes per speaker. If you could please provide us with your name, address, and the item that you would like to discuss so we can find it on the agenda. And please just note the timer. Thank you. Sorry, microphone.
First time with the new system. Derek Lewis, 5526 Sooke Road. And the item number will be 11.3, business license for Driver Enterprises, report for information. Right. I would like to speak to the forthcoming report on council on the business license for 5536 Sooke Road. I'm not here to find out how we got here, as I'm confident the council will do a full investigation as to how we got this to be allowed to happen, and what measures will be taken to ensure it does not happen again, and share the findings with the ratepayers of Sooke. I'd also like to commend staff for doing their homework and confirming what we've been known for years, that despite Mr. Casper's assertion that he made a decision based on facts, not on one person's opinion, it is clear that Mr. Casper's definition of facts and legal non-conforming need to be updated. Despite what was said about 4 previous councils, of which Mr. Casper sat on 3 of them, not taking action on this file, there is no excuse to turning a blind eye to something that is wrong and illegal, and saying that we're not going to act because no one else has is akin to saying I walked by a young man being beaten, but so did the 4 people before me, and they did not stop, and I had done business with the attacker before, so why should I? You were all elected to make informed decisions, and it's irrelevant what came before you. You are the governing body today. Those decisions that are made are supposed to be in the public interest, not in a special interest. And you're in a position not only to make the laws for the best interests of the Sooke citizens, but to make sure that the laws we have on the books are upheld, for if not, having the law is pointless, and it'll be the Wild West for zoning in Sooke. This business does not qualify for a business license, and the reasons are well stated in this report. But the same report has also confirmed this business is running in contravention to the zoning. Council no longer has the luxury of turning a blind eye to this illegal operation for a second time. When Mr. Casper was chair of the F&A committee in 2013, I brought the issue of this illegal operation to the committee's attention at that time, as it pertained to awarding contracts to businesses that did not have business licenses or were non-compliant with bylaws. That committee at that time voted to direct staff to change the District of Sooke purchasing policy to state that contracts only go to legal, compliant businesses. However, today that policy still remains unchanged. Council also set precedents in 2014 when they took action to shut down a waste transfer station on Idlemore Road that was running against its zoning. This despite the fact it was all industrial zone land, but the specific zone did not allow for waste transfer stations. This current situation is a magnitude larger in its contravention of zoning, with full industrial operation taking place on rural agricultural land next to a salmon-bearing river, a public park, and residences. Despite not being a farm, this operation has been getting away with paying farm taxes and reduced taxes for over a decade, giving it an unfair competitive edge over legitimate, licensed, and full tax-paying businesses in Sooke while bidding on municipal work, all while denying Sooke taxpayers the fair share of revenue for the property it should be paying. As a comparison, Buffy's Pub, with a property roughly the same size as the property we're talking about, pays over $20,000 a year in property taxes.
Mr. Lewis, I need you to wrap up, please.
I'll finish this paragraph. While this property pays $6,000 and is arguably at a higher rate class being industrial use, not the zoning. The business also does not have a commercial highway access permit and regularly illegally shuts down Highway 14 and run industrial tracked equipment across the highway, causing delays and damage to road surfaces and potential for collisions. I have one more page to go, and I would like the benefit because I wanted to be a delegate today, but we didn't know about this report coming out until after the deadline. So if I could have another minute.
Is council comfortable extending the time? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Lewis.
Okay. In addition, this business has also removed and deposited soils and rock on agricultural land without a permit and has signs that contravene the bylaw as well as several other regulatory contraventions. The business license has been revoked. Staff have confirmed the business is and always was illegal, and is given that this property, which uses compressed flammable gases and chemicals as part of its complex operation, has never been inspected by the fire department, as well as the precedents being set by many on this council in 2014 with the property in Idlemore, I am demanding, as a neighboring property who is not only directly impacted by the day-to-day illegal industrial use of this and nature of the traffic of this operation, but one who will see property values negatively affected by the use of this property, that council take all appropriate action required to cease the current business-related activities on this property, including but not limited to the use of fines, as well as to notify ICBC that any license that was used to warrant the issuance of a garage policy for this address is null and void. Lastly, it is clear that there has been no excellence in governance or management in this matter, and as such, it is time to act now to rectify that immediately and ensure that this does not occur again in the future for other people in Sooke. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lors. If you're comfortable, if you'd like to provide your written submission to the corporate officer, then council will also have a copy of that as well.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Other speakers for this evening's agenda, please.
Good evening. My name is Diane Bernard. I live at 2018 Penang Road, and my commercial building and business is at 2105 Otter Point Road. Tonight I'm speaking to the business license for Driver Enterprises, item 11.3. As an aside, I want to know I've operated a home-based business, as well as I've made the transition to a fully commercial operating business in the core of Sooke. So I want to say that a few weeks back, I saw council issuing a business license on the fly. It created quite a mess from the neighborhood perspective, the zoning perspective, and the effects on the amount of taxes paid to the district. That was highlighted by the previous speaker. It's good this has come to the forefront, that it's going to get clarified, and that the staff report will get some sound advice. And I must say, it's quite the report. Overall, I read it with a lot of interest. There it is. Previous councils did see this as local businesses and business licensing as an important, critical thing to put in place, and provides a good base for the bylaws, the policies and guidelines for operating a business within a Sooke municipality. There's still a few niggling questions I want to raise, and in this particular staff report it says that the operator is not able to receive a business license. But this raises a question: can a business still operate in Sooke without a license? Local knowledge is, you bet. And why should I even bother to get a license? And council at one time even raised the whole issue of whether to, what was the point of having a licenses. So I think that it's important that in addition to receiving this report, that council resets the tone here for businesses. Business licenses provide assurances to neighborhoods, to financial institutions, to fire safety, and essentially it's proof that businesses are doing what they say they do, where they do it. And all businesses need to have a license to meet the bylaws. Staff recommendation is to receive the report for information. I would say that it's also another thing here, that the best way to support solid and steady economic growth is to set a level playing field so that all businesses understand. Then those issues that look like sweetheart deals or favoritism just don't come into the mix. I believe council's message needs to be to set the path to get businesses back onto following policies, guidelines, and the bylaws and regulations. It'll take a bit of time because it has been really quite lax, and it is a problem or an issue that previous mayors and councils have faced right back to regional directors, Lorna Berry, Bob Clark, etc. So I just wanted to close by saying that when everybody understands and plays by the same rules in terms of business in this community, then you can't help but provide a better atmosphere to welcome businesses and to grow a vibrant local economy. It will avoid all the chaos that we're seeing as a result of what's happening here tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bernard. Other members of the public, please.
Ellen Lewis, 5526 Sooke Road. I also want to speak to 11.3 briefly, and thank you for the report. The report has left out some things, as in 2000, that the property was purchased in 2000, that it isn't legally non-conforming. I think that was a discussion that was came forward. And why did staff not tell council when they asked for a one-day permit that there was a due process to follow where all departments, i.e. building, fire, environment, would need to assess the property before a permit was issued? I think council was left kind of high and dry there because they didn't get that information. You should have had that, because you have the list which I gave you, that should have been carried out. You can't issue a permit in one day. And why was there an intermunicipal license issued, which is for portable businesses, not for car sales, repairs, welding, etc.? And why, when the proponent met with staff to look at rezoning, was that not carried through? Why did not staff report that the proponent had met with them to rezone prior to his asking for a business license? How can council act in a responsible manner without the full knowledge which staff had and didn't share, and why? I know that at the last meeting, October 10th, the mayor was asked to write a letter to Mark Harvey, the land officer, in regards to improving water quality for the basin. And you've written that letter, and Iam Creek, which is a salmon-bearing creek, and the salmon are coming up there now, is a river that needs protection, and the two properties that the owner has there both back onto those properties, and that needs to be dealt with. I also would like to ask respectfully that Councillor Casper may make a public apology for grandstanding and politicking and making decisions on the fly without having all the facts, and for the implied remarks at the last meeting that any information that was provided outside of the applicant's version of the information was only opinion. As you know, the information I gave you was all fact, and for not wanting staff to exercise due diligence on this matter, which was clearly needed for council to see the real facts and make an informed decision. And I'd appreciate that if that would happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lures. Other questions or comments, please? Can I just see if there's anyone here for a first time speaker? Okay, looks like the floor is yours, Ms. Lures. On a different subject?
Different subject.
Thank you.
That's a bit of a problem with this 2-minute thing because there's a lot of things on the agenda. Okay, so the daycare center that's on here on this application for 40 people for the daycare, that's really that property. I know the property very well. It's on a curve and on a hill, and I don't know how that's going to work. It's kind of a dangerous thing. Driving the other night with the wind and the rain, and I'm thinking 40 cars at least turning left. I mean, the issue is there with the restaurant. When the restaurant went in there, when it first went in, nobody was allowed to turn left. The issue with on Wickham's property there with the trucking, that was an issue as too with driving. So I don't know how this is going to work, and for highways to say, well, we'll try it out and see how it works. Well, that's a lot of money for somebody to put forward and then see how it works. And the other question with this is, I'm sure the council is not aware, because I'm only aware because I live there, but across the river, there's a building going up there, and I know that the people there have a daycare, and I believe there's a daycare going into there, but it's no different than what happened across the road from us, Suds and a beer, or whatever it is, and sandwich shop. Nobody that lives around there was notified, so nobody knew what was going in, let alone council. And I don't know how that's happening. And so now council would not be aware that there's a daycare opening just up the road from there. Are you aware of that? No, exactly. So how is that happening? That's my question. How do these buildings happen without going before council?
I think, if I may, there's different businesses open around Sooke. We don't necessarily get invited to their opening or know that they open.
No, but because the land is zoned, just because it's zoned doesn't mean that there isn't a process that we go through. The land might be zoned to allow any number of things, like a daycare, a senior center, a farm. It might be any number of things. But if it changes from its present use to something else, you would think there's some kind of a trigger, especially with the building going up, that would trigger to council that there's a change.
It's something we can look into, but it's not something that we know. I mean, sometimes we get invited to opening events, or
well, not the opening event. I'm talking before it happens. Before it happens, because now you don't know that there's a daycare happening just up the road.
Unless it requires some action from council, like a variance or zoning or any form of process. In some cases, we have delegated authority off. Like, I don't know who renews their business license every year and who doesn't, because it's something that's handled internally by staff. Or if someone gets a permit to build a house, we're not notified unless there's a variance, like you see in some of the materials that comes forward to us. And many daycares are licensed by the province, and there's different inspection that occurs there. They don't come to us for that.
I don't know. Or perhaps Mr. Howitt can help us out on that. I don't know. That works.
Do you have anything further to add, Mr. Howitt?
Thank you, Your Worship. If I'm understanding the comment and or question correctly, if there's a trigger to alert us what's happening, obviously if there's a new building going up, they would require a building permit. If somebody is establishing a new business in a commercially zoned building, what would trigger us to react in any form or fashion would be application for a new business license. But that would be it. It's
But
not
that doesn't come to council.
But it's not going to be coming to council.
No.
Just the building permit would come through.
Not even a building permit. It would be only if there's something that requires council's input, but the rest of it would be handled internally by our operations.
Well, I guess it's a fair playing field again, because we have the development permit issued for the new beer pub, or what's it called, the brew pub opening up.
Yes, but that's also because council rescinded that, had that as, in the past, delegated authority to staff, and then it's changed that council wants to approve every development permit that comes our way, and so council could choose to, again, delegate that authority. Right now, we don't, so then that's why all the development permits come through us. It does slow down the process, so I know that the development community would like to see things move a little quicker. Other municipalities pass it off. We don't in that
But
case.
that was an allowable use, I believe. The zoning wasn't changed for that property.
I don't
in
recall the
downtown.
details, but we
Yeah.
did. It's
Right.
the same. The Royal Bank required a development permit. TD Bank needed a sign variance done. Shoppers needed a sign variance.
So
and something there.
I guess that's my question. So why wouldn't a development permit be issued to
Because
those
development
properties?
permit is mainly form and character, and so there would have to be, A&W is doing facade improvements that require a development permit, so that came to council.
Well,
But-
next to the gas station, there's a building added, for instance. And then the use totally changed from a garage to a brew pub. So I don't know. I'm just asking why it seems like different rules for different.
No, I
and
think
of course,
our
you not knowing.
But it's
that there's a
not,
big
it doesn't
daycare.
mean that there's anything untoward happening in our town, because council doesn't know of everything happening at all times. It just means that we have staff that are fully capable, that know our bylaws and go with them. And so it's only on certain matters. We have a full agenda. Can you imagine us approving every building permit? That would be interesting. I'm sure our builders
I'm
would
just saying,
appreciate
why not a
that.
development permit?
We
issued for
do
everyone?
build development permits. Perhaps, Mr. Howard, would you know offhand why a development permit?
Thank you, Your Worship. Not every development triggers a development permit.
Right.
Development permit areas are established through the OCP, and development permits, if somebody is opening a new business in an established building, a development permit may or may not be required. Probably not.
But if it's a new building,
Again, depending on the circumstances.
It's case by case, Ms. Lors. Thank you.
okay.
Something
Thank
to think
you.
about. Any other comments from members of the public this evening? Okay, so on that note, we'll move on then into our bylaw section. We have bylaw number 680, zoning amendment bylaw 5529, Sooke Road. And I'd like to welcome our planner. Thank you.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. The application before you tonight is to rezone a portion of 5229 Sooke Road, as shown highlighted, from RU2 Rural to Community Facility P2 for the purpose of operating a proposed daycare facility with a capacity of 37 to 42 children. Here's a zoning map of the subject property and the surrounding properties. 5229 Sooke Road is 1.73 hectares, and the Galloping Goose Trail cuts through the middle of the property. The upper portion of the property, located between Highway 14 and the Galloping Goose, is subject to the rezoning application. The remaining portion of 5229 Sooke Road, located between the Galloping Goose and the Sooke Basin, will maintain an RU2 zone. Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure has reviewed the application and they have no objections to the rezoning, and they have granted the owner a commercial access permit to service the property from Highway 14 with the proposed use. They did place a condition on the permit that should passage be deemed unsafe due to the use of the proposed access, the ministry can restrict movement to retain the integrity of the highway. The owner has provided a parking plan to meet the requirements of the Sooke zoning bylaw. The owner has also been made aware of the building permit requirements for a daycare with a proposed capacity of 37 to 42 children. In reviewing the official community plan, staff has found that this application is supportable and consistent with the Gateway Residential designation. And the owner is in attendance tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. So if I may clarify then, so the ministry has seen this and they've signed off, and at this moment they will allow left or right turns in and out of this property.
Yes, Your Worship. They've reviewed it on site twice, I believe, and at this point in time they're prepared excuse me, they're prepared to accept the turning movements as applied for, which is full turning movements, right in, right out, left in, left out. They will monitor the situation, and if it becomes problematic for them, they're well within their rights. Highway 14 is their jurisdiction, and they may in the future want to restrict those movements.
Right in, right out. That.
I wouldn't want to second guess at this time, but there are alternative measures that they can take to restrict, and the applicant is aware of the dialogue that we've had with the ministry, and I believe they've also had dialogue with the ministry as well.
How does the minister actually monitor areas like this?
Unfortunately, it's like a lot of different things like bylaw. It's complaint-driven, accident-driven, traffic generation problems, those types of things. But they will monitor. Okay.
Okay. Questions from members of council? Councillor Parkinson.
Through you, Your Worship. I definitely have problems with the going in, the access to the property. I do believe that it is a serious problem for making the left turns when you're going in or out of the property, and I can see it causing a lot of problems. I believe that it will cause a huge impact on people traveling to and from town. So I'm not sure how that is going to work with that.
Chief?
Yeah, from the fire department's perspective, we made comment earlier in the referral process about the safety there. That is a corridor of continual stress with the fire department, and just for statistic sake, the motor vehicle incident last night was right at that location.
Okay. In the letter that we received from the applicant, there was a comment about ride sharing and the ability for parents to arrange for a different drop-off and pick-up site. In the letter, it's where you drop off and pick up your children. I wonder if staff may know a little bit more about that, because that might alleviate some of the concerns. It may not be 40 children per se picked up, or 40 sets, 40 different families turning in and out. If people are shuttling and ride sharing, it could substantially decrease. I'm just wondering if you know more about this.
I don't, but the owner is available here to answer any questions.
Okay, perhaps what I'll do, I'll go to Councillor Pearson, and then perhaps if I may invite the applicant forward. You've heard a couple of comments made from council and a member of the public. If maybe you could speak a bit more on that. But I'll go to Councillor Pearson first. Go ahead.
Yes, through the chair to our planner. Thank you for the presentation, and I have a specific question for our Director of Development Services. With this long history with the Ministry of Transportation and Highways, I see in here it says the ministry has granted an owner a commercial access permit to service the property from Highway 14. my recollection tells me that a commercial access permit is not something that's easy to get or very likely to happen unless that the highways themselves have done their due diligence. So through the chair to them.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Pearson. I don't really want to second guess what today's Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure is doing. All I know is Highway 14 is their jurisdiction. They've assessed the situation and they consider that the access at this point, they must have considered it to be safe to some degree, or they wouldn't have issued that commercial permit. But they did preface the fact that if it became an issue through backlog on the highway or accident statistics or just general complaints, that they would react and perhaps restrict the access movements at a later date.
Thank you. Is there any other comments or questions from council before I invite the applicant forward? Okay. And feel free to, maybe once you've heard, you can ask something at the time. If you could please come forward and introduce yourself. Sorry, it's actually on the base of the... Oh, one more over.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, sorry, thank you. My name is Cindy Ross, owner of Almost Home Childcare, and we are looking at developing this property. In regard to the pickup and drop-off times that are concerned, I currently have 7 other locations, one of them including being right on Gorge and Tillicum. So I'm very familiar, and I have 37 children licensed at that facility as well. The pickup and drop-off times in the morning can occur anywhere between 7 and 9:30. And the pickup times in the afternoon, of course, same thing, 3 to 5. So we're not having 40 cars lined up. They're all staggered times. Sometimes they're picked up, and that's if we're at capacity. Keep in mind, we're not always in capacity, right? We are offering carpooling sites and spaces, so if parents want to leave their vehicles in the parking, they have the ability to do so. We also have an extended lane, kind of like a merge lane, if you want to. I think you can see it kind of on one of our diagrams, that when you come out right, there actually is a bit of a waiting lane, so you're not jumping right into traffic lanes, okay? So it is a bit of a bus lane as well. So the transit stop is literally right at our driveway. So it also offers parents the options, if they're not carpooling with other families, they can jump on transit and take another vehicle off our roads to be safer. So there are options. The daytime, there are no, between 9:30 our programming starts, so between 9:30 and 3 there are no vehicles. It's just in that higher traffic times, but it's quiet. Like I said, we make it work. We're literally right on the corner of Gorge and Tillicum, same size facility, and we have not had one problem. So,
does council have any questions for Ms. Ross? Councillor Pearson, please.
No, I applaud you because I think it's a need that's out there for daycare spaces. We hear it all the time. So I would.
Yep. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Loggins. Yes. Thank you, Ms. Ross. Could
I add one thing to that?
Actually, I'm sorry, but we already have a motion that's on the floor. So thank you. So first reading has been moved and seconded. Discussion on first reading, please. Right, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Parkinson's opposed. Okay. That was first and second reading, Councillor Pearson. Moved second by Councillor Pearson and seconded by Councillor Berger. Discussion on the motion? I support this going forward. I think that it's the provincial highway. They do have very strong standards, and I think that if we monitor or receive complaints, we can forward them on and adjust accordingly, as our director has said. So I'll call the question on second reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Parkinson opposed. And I believe that's it for now, for readings. Okay, thank you for the staff report, and thank you for attending, and I'm sure you'll receive notification of our follow-up and succession readings. If there's anything that you would like to forward on to us for additional, please send it into info@sooke.ca if you like, or our corporate officer can provide you with some contact details. Councillor Parkinson?
Is there not a requirement for a public hearing?
I believe so. That's going to come I'm only seeing here, like we have first and second reading here, and so public, and I'll get that from staff. We have third reading, public hearing. Where does that fall? Okay, do you need a motion though, that directing staff to schedule that? I just didn't see it in the report. Is that, we typically do that, right?
Through your worship, yes, please.
Okay, so I'd like move that we have the public hearing. Okay, and seconded by Councillor Loggins. Nice catch. Thank you, Councillor Parkinson. All right, so scheduling the public hearing, not the Parkinson, for November. Thank you. It'll be advertised and there'll be time to give comments and the like. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, thank you. That's it. Okay, good. Okay, 9.2, bylaw number 684, permissive tax exemptions. We are now at a point to adopt bylaw number 684. Move adoption by Councillor Pearson and seconded by Councillor Parkinson. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Bylaw 685, blasting regulation amendment. Moved adoption by Councillor Berger and seconded by Councillor Pearson. Just have a question on this. This is moving the time so that they're all consistent with across the board with our other bylaws. Now, I just want to know, because the blasting time is moved up, if a crew is mustering with noises and trucks running and talking, that still constitute noise that they would have to hold off until the set time period. Because I think sometimes when you move things forward, some concerns that I've heard is then, well, now everyone's going to show up even earlier, and they may not be blasting per se, but they'll be mustering and setting up and doing all that and with equipment and the like earlier. So I just want to know that there would be some way that that can be all pushed to the set time. To our corporate officer, please.
Through your worship, if memory serves, the blasting times are now in line with construction noise, and that noise would all be considered as a whole. And perhaps our bylaw officer can confirm that.
I get that, but now like the blasting crew will arrive earlier, so some concern is okay because the other one was at 7 and they couldn't start till 8. Now it's all at 7, which means they're going to show up at 6 and be loud then, like everything's going to move earlier. So I just want to know that for people's quiet enjoyment, that no noise before 7 of any sort.
Your worship, the bylaw regulates the activities of particular equipment. In this case, any construction equipment cannot commence between a certain hour, any blasting that related equipment, any noise from those equipment groups cannot commence before that hour. We don't have control of movement of regular vehicles, people using our roads. So if people are approaching a construction site in their personal vehicle, we don't regulate that.
But what about loud idling trucks?
If it's, again, construction equipment, bulldozers, loaders, graders, that kind of stuff, we will regulate that. Okay. If it's a diesel personal vehicle, then we do not.
Okay, just so I know. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, anything further? I'll call the question on adoption. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Okay, so that moves us to Bylaw 687, Zoning Amendment Bylaw for 6599 Aaronwood Drive. And I'll welcome our planner, Ms. Rice. Thank you.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. Here we are. The application before you this evening was brought to you before on September 18th. However, this time the applicant, upon reflection, he's decided that they would like to rezone a portion of the property to medium density multifamily 2, whereas when it was here in September, the application was for low-density multifamily, so basically going from RM1, we're now going to RM2, which was approved for first and second reading on September 18th, as I said. So the intent of this application is to split zone the subject property to include both neighborhood commercial and medium-density multifamily too. The property is located within the sewer specified area. This is a sketch of the proposed site plan. We can come back to it. The proposal is to construct approximately 19 new townhouse, duplex, triplex units. The proposed units would be similar to those found in the Alders, which is the property just to the northeast. The applicant is offering to impose a covenant restricting height to 12 meters, as the RM2 height is quite high. And they're also proposing that each unit provide 2 parking stalls, one in the driveway and one in the garage for homeowners, which exceeds the zoning bylaw requirement by 0.5 parking spaces per unit. We'll also come back to this. Okay. Under the official community plan, the community residential designation is the designation for this particular site, and it supports low to medium density residential growth along with some associated and appropriately scaled commercial development. All new residential development shall be challenged by the creation of a built green checklist. We want to ensure sustainable construction and single family and multiple family residential dwellings and reduce urban sprawl. Ensure future and existing residential development minimizes the impact on municipal infrastructure and support a mixed use of development and infill where appropriate. And finally, encourage a variety of housing types that include coach housing, row housing, live work units, and townhouses that diversify the housing stock. Under the official community plan as well, we do have policies for housing, as you're aware of. And to recap those, it suggests that we require a minimum of 10% of all new multifamily and condominium units that they be affordable residential housing, and that we should consider allowing developers the flexibility to provide their required affordable housing in different forms, thus creating a mix in these new developments. So, for example, providing secondary suites, rental units, cash, or land in lieu of on or off-site affordable housing. I'm sorry about the mix-up here, or the overlapping, but anyway, it says the applicant believes that by providing a varied mix of housing options between the Aaronwood, this particular Aaronwood site, and if you'll remember before, the same applicant is looking to develop a site on Churchill Road, and so the combined mix of housing that will be provided between those two projects will contribute greatly to the affordable housing mix within the district, and therefore meet their requirements. Here's a surrounding zoning map, so you can see that there is RM1 nearby, Park, R3, comprehensive development zones. This thing is really sticky. There we go. It's backwards. Okay. And so here's just the overview of medium density multifamily 2. Basically, I wanted to highlight the permitted uses here, which allow for apartment building, assisted living facilities, duplexes, cluster dwelling units, and townhouses. And the maximum height you can see is 20 meters. And so for that reason, that's one of the reasons why the main reason why the developer has is willing to put a covenant of 12 meters on the site. So you get the density, but not necessarily the height. So again, this refers to the 12-meter covenant and 2 parking stalls. So if we look at this again, you can see that there are 17 white units and then 2 extra ones off Aaronwood that are potential future expansions, so they may go to 19 or may not, depending on how things evolve. And so each unit will have a parking spot in the driveway, one in the garage, and then 2 guest parking areas, as well as the required 8% amenity area. Okay, and so just an overview, Development Services is supportive of this rezoning to permit the construction of duplexes, triplexes, and townhouses only to a maximum height of 12 meters. The reduction in commercial land size from the original zone is better suited to a true neighborhood commercial node as prescribed by the OCP in 2013, particularly in light of supporting commercial activity in the nearby town centre. The proposed zoning meets several goals and policies established by the OCP and also provides an opportunity for affordable housing, infill development, and a diversity of housing forms within walking distance to Sooke's town centre. And a summary, again, it's a rezoning from neighborhood commercial to medium density multifamily 2. Community residential designation. It is on District of Sooke sewer and CRD water, and it's 0.726 hectares of a lot. And that's the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate that.
Your Worship, if I may, the applicant is here if he has anything to add.
Okay. The only question that I sort of have, or what comes to mind, I'll invite you up maybe once we hear a bit more from council, so you can sort of capture them all together, is a bit more on the affordable housing. I do struggle a bit with that. I support the rezoning for the other reasons. The parking's been satisfied, the amenity area height blending into a neighborhood. And I can appreciate the change from the commercial because it is in very close proximity to the core. And I know we've used the term affordable a lot now. It's very timely. It just, when I see, someone in Sooke with a household income of, say, $50,000 or so, how are they going to enter into this market? So I appreciate that perhaps with the townhouses or triplexes that they would be more cost effective perhaps than other single family residents in the area, but that's all subject to market. And right now there isn't a lot on the market, which basically means the realtor is just going to promote the property and get whatever they can from it. Like, there's nothing that will say it's for a family with this income that can only afford this. It's going to be what the market will decide the price is going to go at. So that's just one piece for myself that I would like to just get a bit more clarity on. It's just the piece that's sticking point for me. Others from council? Councillor Loggins and Parkinson, please.
Thank you. I do definitely support this this application. Thank you. I'm just trying to think and talk at the same time, and it's not working. And actually, I'm glad it came forward this way because I was kind of thinking that it should be zoned RM2 instead of RM1 when it first came to council. I don't know if I said it out loud or if it was the back of my mind, but I'm glad that it is going in this direction because that area needs a bit of diversification, so I think it fits well. And thank you to the applicant for the parking situation. I know that they're doing more than they need to. And then I do agree with our mayor as well in terms of throwing around the term affordable housing. I've heard it a lot tonight. Does that mean it will actually happen? Is the issue actually to solve affordable housing? No, it's not, in my opinion. But just to plug the notice of motion that we have to form an affordable housing committee, I think we need to define what affordable housing means for Sooke so that we can start using it appropriately. But I would like to move first reading.
Okay, is there a seconder for first reading? Seconded by Councillor Pearson, I believe. Okay, so we're on first reading now. I'll go to Councillor Parkinson and then to Berger, please, and then Pearson.
Through you, Your Worship, to staff. In regards to the parking, I understand that there's 2 parking stalls per home, and then you said that there was 2 areas for guest parking. So I was wondering how many parking stalls were in the guest parking, and would that accommodate if they had secondary suites in their homes? Because they're allowed in all areas.
Just to, through your worship to Councillor Parkinson, there are 2 additional visitor parking spaces only, not 2 additional parking areas. So a total of 40 stalls you can just see on the bottom left of the site plan there. So 19 garage, 19 driveway, and 2 visitor.
Thank you.
In terms of secondary suites, though, are they even allowed in townhouse or tripe? So that's a non-issue. They're not permissible anyway in townhouses or triplexes, duplexes. Okay. Councillor Berger, then Pearson.
Yes, thank you. I have sort of a 2-part comment question. The first one, through you to staff. I'm just wondering, typically, what have we done in the past with respects to affordable housing and the 10% contribution that has been asked for with multifamily development, whether it's a multifamily zone or a townhouse zone?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Berger, ordinarily there's an option of cash in lieu or actually dedicating an affordable housing unit or units, depending on the number. As of, I don't know, since I've been here, the majority of the applications have been, they've taken the cash in lieu in relationship to affordable housing. But with this particular application, the applicant has come forward with a mixture of duplexes, triplexes, etc., as his way of accommodating affordable housing. And so that's why we brought it forward in the form and fashion that we have.
Thank you. So now to follow up on the second part, we've tossed around affordable housing pretty much with every development that we've looked at. And when we're in sort of this housing crunch that we're in now, that we always talk about, we need to look at what affordability means and what does it look like with 10% cash in lieu. As we've talked previously about other developments, the cash in lieu component, it will take us an awful lot of time to actually get any money together to build affordable housing, and then we'd have to come up with an affordable housing policy, which we don't have, to then build that unit. So, I mean, this is just sort of, I guess I'm just sort of speaking as I'm thinking here, but it might be for a later date, but what I would like to see happen, further to sort of what you said with the affordable housing piece, while mixed development and multifamily zones typically are less affordable, we are in a really high real estate market, and it doesn't sit totally well with me to know that because we're zoning something in multifamily that there'll be something that's affordable. I would like to see us follow something a little bit more along the lines of how CMHC defines affordable housing as it not exceeding 30% of your median sort of income. Again, it could be a conversation for a later date. I see our staff sort of shaking their head, but you know, I don't know what that looks like in a multifamily development if one unit were to be that, or what the number is. We seem to sort of go around in circles with respects to affordable housing and what's the best way to approach it. I don't know that I'm 100% sold that just doing a multifamily zone is the way to achieve that, because we're in a really high market right now. So those are just my thoughts.
Thank you, Councillor Berger. Councillor Pearson.
I won't say too much more. This is a good project in a good area, and Councillor Berger's and others through the chair comments are what it does points out is that we don't have an affordable housing workable solution, and we as a council need to put something together. And I mean, this is a good project, and the market, if you keep building market, or you keep building homes and using property wisely, it should lend itself towards affordable housing. But affordable to who, I guess, is the question. So we have to be creative. If we're going to really address affordable housing, we have to be creative. We have to look at small homes. We have to look at pre-zoning of lots and where it's going to happen. And then we have to trust the private sector to partner with us. In the meantime, I'll vote for this project because I think it's a good project in a good area. And it does add a component of affordable housing because it's making wiser use of land. So I'm not uncomfortable with what it's trying to do, but it does point out the glaring missing piece of our affordable housing component here in Sooke. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, members of council. I'll call the question then on first reading. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. And second reading moved by Councillor Loggins and seconded by Councillor Pearson. Any further discussion on second reading? There will be a public hearing, so that'll be an opportunity to hear more from the applicant on this matter, and we can, of course, hear the views of the public. So, seeing no further questions from council, all those in favor of second reading? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. And also now the public hearing be scheduled for zoning amendment bylaw number 687, 600-47 in accordance with section 466 of the Local Government Act. Moved by Councillor Loggins and seconded by Councillor Pearson. Will that be coming at an upcoming November date? Okay, great. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. Okay, thank you very much, staff, and to the applicant as well. We look forward to the public hearing. Okay, next up we have a development permit amendment for 6995 Norden Road, Phase 7. And turn this over to Mr. Howitt. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is the fourth development permit amendment that's come to Council. Again, as the phasing has gone on for the Heron View development on Norden Road, what they've done is minimize the footprint of the building. That's all they're doing, and reestablishing the landscaping. They are actually making the landscaping a little more luxurious than it was originally in the development permit. And all the siding and everything, all the facades on the buildings are exactly the same. It's just a matter of reduction of the footprint of the buildings. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Parkinson and Pearson.
I was going to move the recommendation.
Move the recommendation and seconded by Councillor Pearson. Anything to add on any or to state, Councillor Parkinson, as the mover? No? Seconder? Go ahead. Councillor Pearson.
Just, it's nothing to do with it. It's this my disdain for development permits, and when there's minor adjustments in here that, you know, we're actually holding up a project for something that's going to be better to the project. And it's just my own personal opinion, but let's move on with business.
Okay, so in this case, this has come up at the building development workshops. Does council really need to approve every building development or development permit application? Is something to think about. Okay, all those in favor of the motion? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Okay, we've dealt with 11.1 and 11.2, so looking at 11.3, business license for Driver Enterprises, 5536 Sooke Road. And I'll turn over to our fire chief for his report, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report summarizes that Council had issued a business license to Driver Enterprise on September 18th of 2017. As Council has delegated authority for issuing licenses to the license inspector, Council did not have the authority to issue the license and is deemed invalid. Council's involvement now is with the business licensing is limited hearing and appeal of a refusal of cancellation decision by the licensing inspector. A history of the permitted land use has been conducted on the subjected property located at 5536 Sooke Road. The type of business of which the applicant sought as a business license has never been permitted under the zoning bylaw and therefore is not deemed to be lawfully non-conforming. The use has never been permitted through a temporary use permit as well. As Council did not have the authority to issue the business license, the business owner has been advised and such of the appeal process. The applicant has been cooperative and supportive of receiving the information and is supportive of the fire department's presence for pre-incident planning and further fire inspection.
Okay, any questions of the chief of the report? I can appreciate that this has caused some angst within the community, certainly as we've heard from members of the public today. However, we do have a procedure in place. Council's looking for a fair outcome in the end, and we will follow suit with that. There is the appeal process, as the chief mentioned in his report and stated verbally, and we look forward to receiving that and due information, and council will remain open-minded and govern in what we hope to be an open and honest and very transparent manner. So at this point, our direction is just to receive this report. Would someone like to move that motion?
I'll move receipt.
Move receipt by Councillor Loggins, seconded by Councillor Parkinson. So just to clarify, this means that the business license is deemed invalid, and that the applicant or the proponent can choose to appeal this at an upcoming council meeting, provide council with more information, and council will make due decision, but I'll get clarity from our corporate officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to advise that I have spoken with the applicant and he will be proceeding with an appeal that has been scheduled for November 14th.
Okay. All right. Councillor Parkinson.
Through your worship, for an appeal, I've never been through appeal on council. Is that done at a normal council meeting or is it a separate meeting? What happens?
Yes, if we can get some information on what that may look like.
Yes, it will be done at a regular council meeting, but we will provide some additional information to council moving forward.
Thank you.
Would it be framed similar to that of like a public hearing? I've never sat through one either, so that's where my mind sort of went, that it would be like a public hearing where we would receive information and receive submissions within that particular context.
Yeah. Again, we will provide additional information, but my recollection is that the appeal process is for the applicant, though. So,
okay.
You know, the regular process would still be there for the public input, but the appeal process is not to receive public input. It is for the applicant.
Okay, so it's for the applicant to speak solely, and then public input would fall under the normal place that it does.
But I will confirm that to council this week.
Okay, thank you. Did someone else have their hand? Councillor Loggins.
I did. I just wanted to say that I appreciate the report and information and look forward to the process. I was going to ask a similar question to Councillor Parkinson on how that all went. So yeah, I'll look forward to hearing more information on the appeal.
Excellent. Okay, call the question on receipt. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, 11.4, site-specific floodplain exemption for 2295 Phillips Road. Councillor Pearson.
Councillor Pearson has to declare a conflict as the applicant is an employee who reports directly.
Okay, Councillor Pearson is declaring a conflict, and we will come and find you when we're done. Thank you. Okay, so I will turn this over to staff, please, and please note there's also some supplementary information that we've received in the yellow pages in regards to this matter. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just going to just do a brief overview of the report that you have in front of you. Based on the recommendations from the attached geotechnical report submitted by Rising Geotechnical, the owner of 2295 Phillips Road is requesting a site-specific floodplain exemption to allow for a single-family dwelling to be located 19.5 meters from the natural boundary of the Sooke River. The owner has had a registered professional RP Bio on site to review the riparian area regulations, the criteria related to that. The RP Bio submitted a letter on September 8th, 2017, concluding that the RAR, or the riparian area regulation, does not apply to this property due to the estuarine nature of the shoreline and environment to the adjacent property. Should council grant relief to the site-specific floodplain exemption, the owner is required to register a covenant on the title of the property with a report attached from the geotechnical engineer. Excuse me. The covenant will acknowledge that no disaster financial assistance funding is available for buildings or their contents, and will release and indemnify the district from liability in the event of any damage caused by flooding or erosion. We're not really expecting that to happen because of the reports that we have in support of the application, but the covenant is a requirement of the bylaw, and I'd be happy to answer any questions from that.
Okay, so a question that I have with this bylaw, it was amended, I believe, in January of 2013, and that's where there were some changes made to it. This is I think it's the flood regulation, flood hazard. Sorry, I thought I wrote it down and I can't seem to find it. Flood regulation or hazard bylaw or something of that nature. So is the covenant then a provincial responsibility? Like, is it due to provincial legislation that we are requiring this, or how does the covenant come into play?
It's not a provincial regulation or a requirement. But what happened is when the site-specific floodplain regulations were delegated down to municipal jurisdictions or local governments, it was recommended that these types of covenants be obtained because that's what the province did when they were regulating the setbacks within the floodplain areas. And not being here at the time when the floodplain bylaw was produced, I would assume that given the information, the council of the day just accepted it as practice.
Yeah, I just saw the minutes. There was no report. It may have gone through the Land Use Committee at the time. I don't recall exactly, but it came forward January of 2013. All of council was present. But okay. Councillor Berger.
Yes, thank you. My questions were quite similar to yours. And remembering back to when that... I also went and looked up the minutes and saw that there wasn't a lot of report on it. So I was trying to jog my memory as to why we had changed it from 15 meters to the 30 meters. And of course, I couldn't remember what it was with the absence of a report. So I went and did some looking on the internet as to what best practices are. And I found on the the Ministry of Environment webpage that it said that the building setback should be established as the greater of 15 meters from future estimated natural boundaries and distance where native land elevations equals flood construction level. So again, I went back to read our minutes to try and figure out why we changed it when best practices show 15 meters. So in doing that bit of homework and looking at, I believe we made a variance for the neighboring property, which is also on Phillips Road, because they rebuilt their house, and we had to make a variance for them as well. I know that we don't want to make motions on the fly, so I'll put it back to staff for a report so something can be part of the minutes. But for myself, I would like just us to leave it at the best practices at the 15 meters, which therefore wouldn't require a covenant to be registered on title because they're looking at 19.5 meters. So my suggestion would be actually to change the motion a bit. I guess we would have to keep it as the exemption right now because the change hasn't been brought forward, or the proposed change that I'm saying hasn't been brought forward. But I would eliminate the section of the 219 covenant being registered on the property because I would hope that this council would entertain bringing it back to the best practices. But of course, I would ask for a staff report to satisfy some councillors at the table.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Howitt.
I had staff look at some of the history with regards to this, and if I may, there's just a few things, and it's bulleted, so if it sounds a little jerky, it's because of my reading here. Removing the floodplain management provisions from the zoning bylaw and creating a separate flood regulation bylaw was adopted in 2013 as it was a recommended approach by the province for the floodplain hazard management. And that's when I was relating to the fact back in the early 90s when the province wanted to delegate the floodplaining and the restrictions with regards to setbacks to the municipalities. The previous zoning bylaw required a 15-meter setback from the high water mark of the sea, not the Sooke River. Today's zoning bylaw still requires a 15-meter setback from the high water mark of the sea. Local governments are authorized by Section 524 of the local government to designate floodplains and consider when and if development may be allowed in a 1 to 200 year floodplain, provided provincial regulations for flood hazard management are considered. Using a 1 in 100 year floodplain and using the 1 in 100 is not permitted. A technical analysis of the volume of the flow has been carried out on creeks and streams, and it has been determined that the Sooke River should be classified as an ordinary water course. The province recommends a 30-meter floodplain setback from the natural boundary of an ordinary water course. So that's where the information comes from with regards to the floodplain bylaw.
Okay, if council's willing, the applicant's representative is here. I could invite Mr. Clarkston just to answer or to give some comment to council if council's agreeable to that. Good? Okay. Welcome, Mr. Clarkston.
Your Worship, if I may,
yep.
I believe that the way Councillor Berger was headed was with regards to not requiring the covenant. Mm-hmm. Is that yet to be discussed?
Yep, there's been no motion made. Okay.
Randy Clarkson, 2022 Glen Idle Road. This is a kind of a strange bylaw. I don't I don't agree with the bylaw, because if I have a house that's 20 meters straight above, 60 feet, 70 feet above the high water mark, I'd still need to sign the covenant because I'm not far enough back. And if I'm 31 meters back, I can be lower than the 3 meters. The distance away from the river or the distance from the floodplain has no value to the equation. It's only the height above the floodplain. Now, the owners here have been working on this, trying to get their building permit for 2 months. I'm really concerned that if we move forward and they have to do a covenant and they have to go to lawyers and come back to council meetings, it's going to be another 2 months. I really don't think that I really think the bylaw needs to be changed. The bylaw is the problem. The bylaw needs to be looked at properly and adapted. The distance back from the water means absolutely nothing. Everything's going to flood if it floods. It's the height above the water.
Councillor Berger, did you have a question of Mr. Clarkston? Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Clarkston. Mr. Howitt, anything further to?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to clarify a point, if council chooses to approve the setback relaxation, there'll be no reason for anything to come back to council. The covenant will just be registered on title unless council chooses to waive the covenant requirement from the bylaw. But there is no need to come back to council.
Okay. Thank you for that, Mr. Howitt. Councillor Berger?
Yes, thank you. So just to follow up, and I forgot the second part of my notes. When I was doing this, sort of looking back and forth through the Ministry of Environment, I mean, even at 15 meters, and sorry, I deal in feet, that's 49 feet. And so 30 meters is 98 feet. So it seemed to me when I was reading the environment, or the Ministry of Environment's page, that I believe that we should look at the floodplain bylaw and bring it back and put it back to the best practices of 15 meters. So I'll make the motion that we receive the report submitted by the geotechnical and consider site-specific floodplain exemption for bylaw number 561, flood regulation bylaw 2013, to reduce the floodplain setback from 30 meters from the natural boundary of the Sooke River for a single-family dwelling at 2295 Phillips Road to 19.5 meters. And I would leave it just at that, and then I'll have a second motion to bring back the floodplain bylaw.
Second that motion.
Okay, there's a seconder. Okay, do you want to motivate? Go ahead.
Just to speak to it. Yeah. The reason why I'm not a fan of the covenant is that if we're going to agree to do the setback, right now, and we heard through another application a little while back, land titles is really backlogged. So it wouldn't be the slow process of the district. It's the slow process that land titles is going through right now, and I just think we should move forward with it.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because I think too often our staff are always held for slowing everything down when often it is with other agencies, and sometimes things move out of our hands completely. So I appreciate that. I guess my question is, okay, if we don't do this covenant, what is the district's liability? Where are we exposed in any way?
Well, Your Worship, anytime a regulatory body makes a decision on an application, there's exposure.
Right.
The reason for the covenant in the first place, it was a recommendation of the province.
Okay.
Whether council wants to proceed with registration of the covenant is a decision for you to make. It's brought forward in this context by staff because the bylaw is written that way.
No, and I totally appreciate all the good work that staff has done, and that I think it's important to highlight that they are doing their work based on the bylaws that they have to follow. So they have to put this forward in the report. They're doing their job, they're doing it well, and we appreciate that, and that's why it is what it is. So that's where it's the bylaws that we've put in place. It's unfortunate that the context is there, because I just see that we adopted it all. I know that the CRD did mapping, I think in 2012, and it was about the impact, the rise in sea level changes in areas that would be impact in and around Sooke, mainly hitting areas around the Sooke River, some in the Kaltassin area, Whiff and Spit area, anywhere where it's close, that would happen. And, but I appreciate also where this is and the height and so forth. So that's something to take into context as well. Okay, Councillor Loggins on the motion.
I would prefer that we followed the procedure and adhered to the bylaw and changed that first or applied the covenant, so I'm not in favor of the motion. I do agree with the report and what the presenter or the applicant has mentioned, so that I would support that change in the bylaw, but I just would like to do things properly.
No, and I appreciate that as well. If we did bring the bylaw back, this matter would be put on hold. And then, well, one or two things would happen. It would be the covenant, and then they would wait several months to have it approved through land titles. It wouldn't come back to council. If council put this application on hold and then looked at redoing the bylaw, then there would be several meetings to do something like that, likely. So they would be stuck waiting
And
while we sorted
just
that.
to follow up,
forward.
I understand that, but I don't want this to be seen as favoritism, not following our bylaws and not following procedure, and that's why.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Councillor Berger?
Yes, thank you. And that's, once we vote on this motion, that's part of my second motion. I don't take any issue whatsoever and echo your comments and thanking staff for the report. It's the fact that in 2013 we changed this bylaw, and I believe the bylaws is flawed, and I'd like to remove certain parts of that bylaw and work through it properly. So for me, it's nothing to do with any sort of favoritism or anything going forward. It's recognizing that here we've added another layer of regulation onto what the best practices of the province are, and I'd like to sort of strip those down, as you heard me say before. If the province has regulations, why are we adding more to them? So that's my next motion.
Okay. Anything else from council? All right, I'll call a question. Or, sorry, Mr. Howe, did you have a final comment?
Your Worship, if I may, if there's a concern about the delay that the registration of the covenant may cause with regards to obtaining a building permit, I can work with the applicant and their legal counsel to resolve any kind of delay that they might receive. And I've already talked to the applicant earlier on today and said that I would work with her if council chooses to move forward with the motion.
Okay. All right, I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Loggins opposed. Carries. Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Berger for your follow-up, please.
Yes, thank you. And I'd like to direct staff, thank you, Carolyn, for reading my mind right now, to bring back the floodplain bylaw for discussion and possible amendments based on the province's best practices.
Okay, we'll just wait for that up there. Is there a seconder? Councillor Berger has seconded by Councillor Loggins. Is that capturing your intent that council directs staff to bring back the floodplain bylaw for consideration of amendments to best practices for setbacks?
Sure. We can look at it as totality as well, just based on the BC's best practice guide.
Yep. Councillor Parkinson?
Through your worship to staff. So by making these motions, are we going against the bylaw that we have in place for the floodplains or no?
Perhaps our corporate officer can answer that. So by the motion that we passed, are we contravening something? Is that your question,
That's correct.
Councillor Parkinson?
Through your worship, I actually would defer to our Director of Development Services.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with the covenants and how they are put in place on title.
Okay.
Thanks.
Direction that council's moving in.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm sorry I'm not that familiar. My concern would be, and we could confirm this, but it would result in a delay tonight, is that the property could be deemed in contravention of the bylaw if there is no covenant exempting it from the bylaw on title.
And that's why I was asking.
Okay, so
I don't want to be in conflict again.
okay, so but this isn't the first time. This isn't the first matter that we've done that. So in that case, it would be questioning all the ones that council has passed recently.
It would be bettering ourselves and moving forward properly.
But in the case of like the one that for Knox Vision, we didn't require a covenant on there. That was very recent. Councillor Berger?
Yes, thank you. Then can I make a motion to waive the requirement of the covenant for bylaw? Sorry, I'm on it right now.
Okay, we still have a motion though for the floodplain to come back for discussion, so we'll deal with that one.
Sure.
Perhaps if you can find the January 2013 report, it must be somewhere so that we have that as a context, but it sounds to me that it was from the province, so we'll take that. I'll call the question on this. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Go ahead, Councillor Berger.
Well, I'm just, if the rest of the table isn't satisfied with contravening a bylaw, the way to go around that is to waive the requirement of the covenant. And I'm just wondering, through you to staff, would that be the appropriate measure, or do we leave it as is and then wait for the report to come back and change the bylaw?
But I think in this case, it's getting clarity on what I wouldn't want to do is see this application come back, because that's not fair. We've made a decision that we don't require a covenant, like we've done in others, where we didn't feel that the covenant was necessary. One of them was the Knox Vision, I believe, putting in a bus stop or something. There was a covenant or something that we took off, and a few other ones that I can't fully remember. So that's where, why now are we procedurally moving off course when we've heard that this is best practices, this is over and above the best practices put forward by the province. And through the development workshops, we're trying to find ways to streamline and improve upon our development process, where we have adopted anything and everything that other municipalities and other jurisdictions have felt that we should have, model bylaws, everything. We've put them all into place, and we've actually hindered our staff and slowed down our processes unnecessarily so, because at the time it was the model bylaw that we should have had. Yeah. Councillor Loggins?
And you're 100% correct, and these motions are not incorrect, but the timing is incorrect, and that's the issue, for me at least.
Okay. Well, we'll get the report over to staff. I'm not... You just pointed at each other.
Your Worship, just for clarity, the bylaw requires, as a condition of your approval for the exemption, that they register a covenant on the property as described in the bylaw. It's not going to hold up these proceedings tonight to resolve to approve that exemption. It was a concern that the dealing with the covenant would delay the ability for a building permit to be issued. But as I said a little bit earlier,
yeah, I'm sort of stuck in a rock and a hard place. I don't want to cause any delays for the applicant, but I can't put us in a situation where I'm going against our own bylaws. So the new recommendation.
You can just withdraw the.
Oh, okay. So then I will withdraw.
Okay, is that all that the corporate officer requires to strike that first motion off the...
And does the seconder agree?
Does the seconder agree? Okay. All right, so now would you like to move that motion in its entirety? Or would someone like to move the motion in its entirety with the inclusion of the covenant? Moved by Councillor Parkinson and seconded by Councillor Berger. I think this is a good discussion, and I know that some people are probably cringing to hear me say that, but I think it's important as we go through this that we've gotten clarity from staff. I think there is definitely an appetite by council to help improve and streamline the process to make it consistent, and I think we understand a bit more as to where we can move and where we can't. But I think it's healthy to have this conversation, and then procedurally how we can unstick ourselves from potentially sticky areas. But we've heard our staff say that they service-wise want to work with the applicant and to see this happen, which is excellent, because we are focused on service delivery, and so certainly if the applicant runs into any delays, or if it does grow long, then we want to hear about that. And at the same time, we have some challenges with some of our bylaws and some of our policies and they've been identified. I don't think that was me. Okay. They have been identified through the various workshops, and there's a lot of work to do, and it's reflected in some of the committees that council is bringing forward for discussion. So I think this is good. I think this is also giving us a bit of the learning that, not learning, but I think it's just healthy debate. Councillor Loggins on the motion.
Thank you. I do appreciate that we were able to go back and fix this. And I understand that we may have waived covenants in the past, but it's important for us to do our due diligence going forward and better ourselves and try to keep things moving properly forward. I completely agree that we need to relook at this floodplain bylaw, so I'm very glad that Councillor Berger noticed that and did the research and brought that back with her motion. I'm also very happy that we are not in contravention of our bylaws, as that's something I believe we have to be very diligent in going forward. So I'll support the motion.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Correspondence, please. Oh, let's get Councillor Pearson back.
He'll be okay. He said that he would work with her. She texted me and said that she was okay with the covenant. So, but isn't it supposed to cover our butt as well?
Okay, so correspondence from October the 2nd to 12th, please. Are we looking to move receipt?
Oh, I would like to bring one forward, please.
Okay, which one would you like to extract?
The letter regarding speeding on Phillips Road.
Okay, from October the 3rd. Okay. Anything else to extract? Okay, so we'll receive the rest as a block. Would someone like to move receipt? Moved by Councillor Loggins and seconded by Councillor Berger. All those in favor of receipt? Opposed is carried. And October the 3rd correspondence from Mr. Brian Nemirovsky. Go ahead, Councillor Parkinson.
So this gentleman's not the only one to complain of the speeding on Phillips Road. And I've been down to a couple of properties down there where I was asked to listen to the trucks going by, and the buses are speeding down there, and I do believe that we need to have more signage or something put up so that people slow down going over the small bridge there as well. So I think it's a real problem.
Okay, so were you maybe looking at a staff report for suggestions on... The thing with this road is that the speed changes, and it's not necessarily the same speed depending on which direction that you're going in.
The sign should be changed.
So, you know, like... Mr. Howitt?
If I may, Your Worship, we're looking at Phillips Road right now. We're also looking at Sun River Way. We are hoping to get our speed reader fired back up. We had a computer glitch and we had to get another laptop to run it so we can program it, so we can actually collect the data, so we can give it to the RCMP so they can do more patrols on these particular roads. We are also looking at signage generally within the Sun River area and a couple of other areas. But we don't want to jump into anything until we get the speed reader up and we get some data back, and then we'll start looking at the signage.
That's the one that doesn't require attendance. It's just sort of posted on the lamppost or like a stanchion or something.
Yeah, we had it. We've had some. Apparently, we bought a Monday morning or a Friday afternoon speed reader, and we've had some internal problems with it from the computer part of it. But we hope to get it fired up in the next week or so. But I was really reluctant to go do a whole bunch of re-signing until we get some indication of exactly how fast people are going, so we get a really good indication, and then we'll be able to supply that information to the RCMP, as I said, as well. And we are also, rather than looking at posting the speed reader up on the posts, which is a real pain for the staff because that thing's about 47 pounds, we are looking at purchasing an aluminum trailer like other jurisdictions, including the people here in Sooke who have one. The Speed Watch have one. So we want to get one of those so we don't have to send two people out there to reorient the speed reader. We can just pull it around with one of our trucks. So we're working on it.
Okay. Councillor Parkinson and Berger?
But I do believe that the signage with the speeds going side by side different should be changed and not like months down the road.
Councillor Berger?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I find this road difficult too. I live on Phillips Road, so I drive it every single day. And having the speed limits not being consistent is also, like you said previously, is an issue. I would actually like to know what the RCMP feel is a suitable speed limit. I don't know how we got to 30 in one section, 40 in another, and then 30 again in another. So it changes twice or 3 times on that road. So I agree. I think I'd like to know what the RCMP have to say is what they feel is a suggested speed limit. And there is an officer that also lives on that road, so hearing from him might be helpful.
Well, it's also, I think, in the LAC, if there's no posted sign, then you go 50, unless it's posted otherwise. And so I remember, like with Sun River, 50 was deemed to be too fast, so that's why the speed was lowered in Sun River to 40, except for the playground zone, where it's clearly marked as 30. But then people still go like 50 in the 30 zone.
If I may, Your Worship, the RCMP won't tell us what they think the appropriate speed zone is. We'll do some calibration with our speed reader. Most of the speed zones that you find in municipalities and even in the provincial jurisdiction is complaint-based. Okay. If there's a reduction to be had or divine political intervention to have it reduced. But I think we need some background information from the speed reader before we go out there, other than correcting, as Councillor Parkinson said, correcting the signs that are giving different speeds, and we'll do that.
Okay, so I think that we'll receive a report in a while.
If I may, Your Worship, after we do some analysis from the speed reader, we'll come back to council with a report.
Okay, so perhaps then a motion that council directs staff to provide a report on road safety and speed limits on Phillips Road. Moved by Councillor Parkinson and seconded by Councillor Pearson on the motion. Councillor Loggins?
I was just going to add with the inclusion of the speed reader data.
Oh, right.
I don't know if it's necessary. I don't think so.
I think that'll just...
No, the data is necessary. I'm getting a weird look. But I mean the wording, sorry.
Okay, I think that'll come out in the report, and perhaps maybe staff could just ask our CMP to monitor this road. I'd be curious to see, because if it is 40 all the way around and people are going 60 or 70, there's a problem. It's not safe, even if the road was all changed to 30 or all changed to 40. The issue is speeding on the road. So that'll be good. All right, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, so we have some notice of motions here. So first off, introduced at the last meeting was a notice of motion from Councillor Berger, and that is that council directs staff to reinstate the 48-hour building permit. So Councillor Berger has moved that. I'm looking for a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Pearson. On the motion, Councillor Berger, then Parkinson, and then I'll go to our chief.
Through our workshops, through the development, the 2 development workshops we've had, it rang loud and clear, and you can see from the minutes that were included in this agenda package, that for me it was twofold. It was getting the building permit process going, but also putting a bit of that responsibility back onto the applicant. So the 48-hour building permit did just that. It provided a checklist that we came to find out some developers are still using, even though there's not the permit isn't actually available. So what it does is it states in the description of the building permit that only applicants that have every single box checked, so your complete building permit application, your home warranty protection, your sets of plans, your highway use permit, there's a whole host of things that the applicant has to do before this application can be accepted. And really it takes a bit of work off staff's shoulders because they're not chasing these people down trying to get a complete application. So there is one change though, I should have put in my motion, because this does say on the actual application that we currently have, it says permit applications must show the 2012 building code changes. This was adopted in 2013, I believe, so I'm wondering, and I'll look to maybe the building department or to corporate officer, should wording change just to say to meet all current building codes, or do we need to keep the new code that was there? I would say it probably just get rid of the part where it says permit applications must show 2012 building code changes, including seismic requirements, so on and so on. I think a simple statement to show must meet all current building codes would probably suffice.
This is in the application
on the
itself.
actual application itself. I'm just looking at it online.
Okay.
And again, just for everybody else on the table that isn't familiar with this building permit application, it is only applicable to 1 and 2 family dwellings. So a big subdivision can't use this. That takes way more staff time, and they need to look at a whole host of things. So this is just for a 1 or 2 dwelling unit. And again, it puts a lot of responsibility back on the development community to make sure they have everything in a row.
Councillor Pearson, then I'll go to our chief. Sorry, did I call?
Yes, okay.
Okay, you'll need to wait, Councillor Pearson.
Okay.
Go ahead, Councillor Parkinson. Thank you.
Thank you, through your worship. So I don't agree with this motion. I think that you created a development engagement workshop. They had their meeting on September 6th. You have members of the public coming forward, putting in all their input into what they would like to see. And they stated that one of the things that they would like to do is bring back past district models and other similar models from like-sized municipalities for potential implementation. So this committee went and studied it, did all their work, decided that they wanted this to be brought back to the next meeting for discussion. So we're kind of sidestepping what this group is doing. So I think that we should carry on and leave it with the development engagement workshop.
Okay, I'll go to our chief now and then back to Councillor Berger. Go ahead, Chief.
Thank you, Your Worship. As I saw this motion come up, I engaged our building inspectors, and being part of this development committee as well, kind of recommending that the building inspectors be involved with some of this process. So they had some good input. They advised me right away that the 48-hour permit never worked properly in the first place, and there was some reasons for it. And they made reference to other municipalities where it's actually working. And some of the things that need to be in place is where the public have already talked to the planning and the engineering departments, and there's closure and compliance, with an application, and then it actually comes to the building department. For example, if the geotech is completed, structural engineering is involved from the project, and any restrictions are made aware of, such as covenants and easements, and all these requirements looked after before issuance of a permit. Our current building inspectors review covenants and check for compliance and DCC relevance and all that. They made a recommendation this can be done, more in the concept of an expedited permit with some sort of fee schedule. So if they can kind of bump one over the other and what's right to do and how one becomes priority over the other. So really, a report coming forward, recommendation from the actual development committee with some involvement with the building inspectors is what's coming from staff.
Okay, it's just not a formal committee, like it's still sort of loosely in a workshop role, and it's great to have all these folks giving the input that they are. It's just because it's not a formal committee, no one there has any accountability, and they may or may not show up, and I don't necessarily know who's going to be in the room until the day. What I may suggest is just to request staff. Friendly idea would be then, my concern, now I'm talking and thinking at the same time, it seems to be the trend tonight, is what is the impact on staff, knowing that that we are down in our planning department. So I just don't want to say, okay, you need to do this when we may not have the complement available in the department. So it's just sending out a promise that we can't deliver on because we are under-resourced. So an idea rather than is it could, council can do what it may. You could reinstate it. You could refer it over to staff and ask for their input. This automatically would have the building inspectors provide their input as well with the whole staff member, and then to come back and say, okay, here's why we can do this or why not, and here are some other reasons or some other things, because I know that staff have a lot of good ideas as well in terms of how to improve service and to make it better. So that would be an idea as well, as to refer to staff, or you could withdraw it and leave it for the workshop is the third option too. It has been moved and seconded though. Councillor Pearson, did you have your hand up, or did I just call on you?
I think you just looked over at me. I do have some opinions.
You do have some opinions you'd like to share. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think that the intent when this came out, past council and past practice before, was for those builders that we have in our community that know what they're doing. It wasn't really for the, I think somebody walking in just off the street say, okay, I want to build a house. I don't think that was a part of it. I think it was about them turning in the paperwork, but putting the onus back on them and reducing that staff workload. I think that was sort of the intent of it, where we started. I'm perfectly happy to support this in intent, because I think it's one of the things that it's a misnomer out there, and it's a dissatisfier for people. They're waiting and they don't always know the inner workings that are out there. So I think it's an improvement. I think if we're proceeding down this road, again, I think the development committee or whatever it's called has to have some skin in the game, as far as, because they've got some public input as well. So I think it's timely that the discussion's up. I appreciate that Councillor Berger's brought it forward.
Councillor Loggins and Berger.
Thank you. I think this is a great idea, but I don't personally have enough information to make a decision on this tonight. I would prefer to refer it to staff if we could. I want to know why it was taken away, what impacts it had then, what the current impacts would be now, and going into the next year with our staffing restrictions. In a perfect world, I'd love to see this go back to the development committee if we had one, or at least that working group, because it would be great to have that information from them as well. And that's what I would need to vote on this. I don't want this to fail, though, because I'd like more information.
Referral, an amendment to refer.
I would make an amendment to refer, because I think if we can do it, it would be great, and I don't want it to just be a failed motion.
Okay, there's an amendment. Is there a seconder to refer to staff? Councillor Berger? I don't know who seconded. So Councillor Berger seconded to refer it to staff. So on the amendment, or Councillor Berger?
Yeah, my reason for bringing this back forward is, it was back in May that I did the notice of motion to get things going with the development committee. I wanted us to look at our permits. I wanted us to look at our application process. There were lots of things that I sort of had in that notice of motion, and then we decided to go the workshop way. Well, now our next workshop's not going to happen until maybe November. We've completely missed the building season. So for me, it's a bit of a frustration level. I do understand that there have been people in the past that loved the 48-hour building permit, and it did work great for them. I know that it was a hindrance for some other people as well. But if you read the document, and sorry, I did print a copy out for everyone here tonight, but it's on my office at home. There's a huge list of requirements that have to be submitted with this application. The reason I'm going to support going back to staff, because please let us know what else you need. I think we have to find middle ground. We've got to find something that's going to work for both staff and the development community, so we can come together and streamline development in our community. So I'm very happy to refer it back to staff to say, what else do you need to see in this document? I just want to see things moving forward so we can all get on the same page. All too often we hear that the complaint is with the District of Sooke, and then we hear from within our own offices that they're incomplete applications. So in my mind, this was a way to marry us and bring us together and put that responsibility of, here are a whole host of things that we need. This talks right down to sanitary storm mains, it talks to code compliance, it talks to ground levels, talks to septic fields, it talks to highway use permits. There's a huge list here of check marks that needs to be checked off. So if there's additional things that staff see need to be added, please, by all means. I just want to get that ball rolling. And with all due respect to the workshop, if you look at the action items that are included in the workshop, they're huge. There's lots of things that we need to go over. And one of them is reinstate the 40-hour building permit, placing a larger responsibility back on the applicant. Provincial regulatory requirements clearly identified. What are we doing to add separate layers to that? There's a ton of points that came out of that workshop, and this was just one of them. So I'm picking one that maybe we can get everyone on the same page and get building and development going within the district.
Councillor Parkinson?
No,
Okay, so just to touch on this, what I would like to hear from staff is like we had this 48-hour permit, and then for whatever reason it's not at play. So just why did that change happen? But you can bring that in the report, and then also just I'd really need to know what the impact on staffing levels looks like as well for the service delivery, because if we do implement it, we have to be able to follow through with it. But that can all come in the report too. Just want to add though, with the intent of the workshop was that I had to step out of the last one, and you'll notice from the first one we had the workshop and the minutes were at the following council meeting, and then council could have moved anything forward through to a committee of the whole or to council to discuss and review. It didn't necessarily have to delay, and that's where I think there was just a bit of a communication breakdown there, because then this workshop, the minutes were ready, but then they didn't come available until now. They should have come up a while ago, and then at any time, a council could take those ideas and say, hey, let's recommend a staff report, let's get this. Because anything we bring forward here is an opportunity for public input on them. So we're not shutting out any members of the public. It's just that this is what a workshop said, okay, here's some key points that we need to delve into, and they are quite full, so now we're taking one off and we're getting a staff report. Really, I thought that this would have actually happened some time ago, and that's fine because it's coming forward now, and then we can just make sure. There's likely other things in the system that need to be improved upon, but this is one that's been identified by members of council.
Just one last quick comment through you to staff. What I would love to see in the report coming back forward is what didn't work. Mm-hmm. What things are on this application that aren't there, what doesn't need to be there. I mean, you know the intent of where I'm going with this, but if it doesn't work, I would love to see in the report that comes back to us what can make it work.
And I've also heard that from some that our turnaround time is fine. And it could be other things that are causing slowdown, not necessarily the permit issuance. So we can get to that, and I think it'll be a good conversation. Okay, so motion. I'll call the question on the amendment, and that was to refer it to staff. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. And now on the main motion as it's been amended, please. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. We're referring it to staff. Yeah, so we've amended that. So now we have other notice of motion. So thank you, Council. I asked you to come back with committee ideas. So we have from Councillor Parkinson that the Sooke Program on the Arts Committee be reinstated, and that's so these will all be debated on the November 13th. So those terms of reference already exist. Sooke Community, if there's any changes, though, that you might see, Councillor Parkinson, I would suggest if you can talk to our corporate officer, talk to me about that. Sooke Community Centre Advisory Committee to be reinstated, as Councillor Loggins is making that notice of motion. Terms of reference also already exist. Councillor Loggins also has a Youth Advisory Select Committee. Select meaning there's a difference between select and standing. Select is a council committee, standing is a mayor committee, so that's sort of the difference between the two. You'll need to think of terms of reference as well as Affordable Housing Select Committee, Councillor Casper, Land Use Select Committee, as well as the Finance and Admin Select Committee. That's a change from the past standing committee that existed for both of those, so that should be looked at. And I would like a Trails Task Force to form, and I could form that as a Mayor's Task Force, but I'd like to get your input on it anyway. So one thing to think of as the sponsor of these, is it your expectation that you would be the liaison to all of these, and also what sort of time frame, staff resources needed, when would these committees meet, would they happen on a Monday and replace a committee of the whole slot, those sorts of things. So I think any of that information, if you could have it for council to consider at the next meeting, that would be great. Okay, so they're here for introduction. So there's no in-camera resolutions to report of that I'm aware of. I missed our council verbal reports. Who would like to go first? Seeing none, I have the floor. Oh, you did? Okay, go ahead. You can go ahead, Councillor Parkinson. Go ahead.
Through you, Your Worship. I just wanted to say that I've been attending the meetings on the Royal Theatre and the McPherson Theatre. and 12 of the 13 municipalities have been participating in the discussions. We have another meeting in November, and once they formulate what the plan is, I will be bringing it back to council.
Great. Other members of council? Councillor Berger.
Sure, just a quick report. We had a C-Park meeting last week. C-Park decided to keep the golf course open 2 weeks longer, so it went to the middle of October. And as a closure so far in the budget, it looks like they'll probably be close to break even, which is huge because they thought that it would be a deficit in the first year. So the budget hasn't been passed completely yet, but it looks like it'll be, the golf course will run at almost a break even, which is great. We also discussed budget processes looking into next year, and again, nothing is formal yet, but we did have discussions around where we're at with the requisition, and that's the portion that the CRD and the District of Sooke pay. There looks like there's going to be a surplus right around the $50,000 mark, and the proposed requisition increase was $45,000, so I made a motion to offset the increase by the surplus rather than just adding it to the reserve fund. So once the budget is actually passed, and if that goes through, there should be a zero increase in the requisition for C-Park, which is all good news, but again, nothing's final yet.
Okay, great. Other comments from councillors? Elsewhere, that's a wrap. The movie that was filmed here for over 6 weeks has now concluded. The production crew, there's only a few production crew left. I did connect with the crew because I'm asking what their feedback was, what was their experience like in Sooke. They are going to get back to me. How can we attract another feature film of this nature? What have we learned from it? All of that. So doing a bit of sort of research into that. They did say that there was excellent service received throughout the community, and the hotel, of course, was what sort of made it possible for them to choose this location, just the ability to have cast and crew together on site. My ministry meetings continue. Having met with Transportation and Health, I have Education and Solicitor General coming up, and likely Agriculture as well. And I'm in continuous communication with our MLA, the Premier, as well as his constituency office. Excellent to see council committee ideas come forward. I think that's great. I appreciate everyone really taking up that call to action. And of course, if there's other ones you have in mind, bring them forward and let's talk about them. Talktober is this Wednesday at the Community Hall from 4:30 to 7:30, an opportunity to meet our staff. There will be a door prize, coloring contest for kids, all sorts of fun activities. It's very good. I'm looking forward to it. November 23rd, the Royal Roads University Master students are presenting their presentations. They've done another round out here, and we'll be presenting them. It's open to the public. It'll be at the hotel, I believe, from 6:30 to 8:30 on the 23rd. In terms of the CRD, the board chair is up for election next month. So why am I raising this? Is because the committees that I am assigned to are at the discretion of the chair. The chair may form new committees, may change the membership. Sometimes what I sit on changes. I put in my requests, but I don't necessarily get everything that I've requested. So it's likely things will slow down a bit because then it's November and then the new chair. It depends. What happens, of course, then it's December. It'll likely be January that the new committees will kick off. No. I do not have time for that. I'm not running for board chair. I say that but thank you. No plans. So we'll just see what happens there. And I think that's about it. So thank you, everyone, for listening. And on that note, motion to adjourn, please, at 9:48. Moved by Councillor Berger and seconded by Councillor Pearson. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried.